He had devoted his entire life to the blade. Everyone recognized who the phantom sword was, and no one could triumph over him. And no one could triumph over him. In his last days, his opponent requested him to someday look after their former sect. The phantom swordsman wasn't enthusiastic about it at all. When abruptly, in the midst of the discussion, in the midst of the dialogue, his companion was obliterated. A vibe assault also approached in his direction. An energy assault also approached him, but he intercepted it. Before him stood a creature he had never encountered before. With an unexplainable presence. With an unexplainable presence, the phantom swordsman had no opportunity. Severed in two in an instant, divided in two in an instant, how could malevolent energy be so powerful? The instant he inquired this, the charm his companion had bestowed upon him illuminated. The amulet his companion had bestowed upon him gleamed. And that's how he seized control of the physique of Manhwa, an unskilled senior apprentice of a renowned sect. Someone with 20 years of existence filled with utter disgrace, with abilities still inferior to the majority of his juniors. With abilities still inferior to the majority of his subordinates. An utter idiot so imprudent that he jeopardized his own life to rescue someone and perished. And that was how the phantom swordsman seized control of his body. Everyone present is still awful. Their footwork is a disaster. They shift when they ought not to, can't maintain stability, and as a result, can't maintain equilibrium, and due to that, none of their strikes possess genuine power. After observing for a while, the inference is clear. After observing for a while, the conclusion is clear. No one here even comprehends the fundamentals. But there is one exception, the teacher. His name is Mu Jin, and unlike the others, he's genuinely doing a good job. He rectifies errors appropriately. He rectifies errors accurately, clarifies matters distinctly, and doesn't shirk responsibilities. It appears he's the final follower of the second generation. So naturally, he concluded up assuming that position. And truthfully, there was nothing amiss with that. And truthfully, there was nothing incorrect with that, at least until now. From above, Mu Jin concludes the training session. As the disciples depart, whispers circulate. As the followers depart, whispers circulate. Evidently, he's been more severe recently. Then a young woman spots the protagonist. Then a girl observes the protagonist and inquires if he's all right. He gestures back nonchalantly, stating he's fine. But in her mind, she can't dismiss the sensation. That something about him feels unusual. Mu Jin descends the stairs and salutes Mu Huai, expressing regret for not acknowledging him sooner. Apologizing for not welcoming him sooner because he was occupied with training. Mu Huai states he comprehends. He understands how significant that obligation must have been, particularly when it ought to have been his initially. Mu Jin bows, expressing he's thankful for the chance. That's when Mu Huai reveals it. He mentions he'll be reclaiming the position. The nearby disciples halt. The girl from before murmurs to the others, inquiring if she heard that accurately. Even Ho recognizes now his doubts were valid. Mu Huai truly has transformed. Mu Jin counters, stating Mu Huai was the one who requested him to assume control initially. Mu Huai coolly responds, "What's wrong with accepting accountability for his own obligations once more?" Mu Jin retorts. He claims Mu Huai imposed the position onto him due to his insecurity. That's when Mu Huai chuckles. He understands it now. This fellow isn't merely assisting. He aims to become the primary disciple. He desires to become the primary disciple, the one who can inherit the sect leader. And with most first-generation disciples occupied reconstructing Mount Hua, the quickest way to transform the sect. The quickest method to alter the sect isn't via elders. It's through the second generation. Additionally, in addition to that, there's the violet aura circulation method. A method only the sect chief and the primary disciple can master. Mu Huai requires it. Thus he won't retreat. So he won't yield. Mu Jin becomes irritated. He mentions the incursion of the palace of the Black Knight, states Mu Huai defied commands, remained behind, and led others to follow his example, compelling the elders to step in. Mu Huai grins, then confesses it. Then confesses it. He states Mu Jin is correct. And that's precisely why he's assuming accountability now. Mu Jin shouts. Mu Jin shouts, inquiring how anyone could have faith in him. Mu Huai bows his head, stating Mu Jin merely doesn't grasp the circumstances. As he ascends the stairs, Mu Jin inquires what he's misinterpreting. Mu Huai halts. With a frosty gaze, he questions since when did he require Mu Jin's consent? He's not seeking authorization. He's not requesting consent. He's notifying him courteously. Mu Jin's thoughts race. The individual before him doesn't seem like the senior apprentice he recognizes anymore. Unfazed, Mu Huai declares. Unconcerned, Mu Huai declares he'll assume control of morning training commencing tomorrow. Any grievances can be raised. Any grievances can be raised after the session. And he suggests Mu Jin not to take it personally. Mu Jin murmurs that he feels like he's observing a wholly different individual. He's gazing at an entirely distinct individual. Mu Huai responds serenely, individuals transform when they approach death. The disciples murmur amongst themselves, attempting to comprehend what just occurred. Some recognize Mu Jin isn't halting him. Others conclude they ought to speak to Mu Huai directly. As evening descends, two apprentices near his quarters. Mu Huai perceives them immediately. They request to converse away from others. He seizes his wooden blade. The girl states they desire him. To retract what he mentioned previously. Mu Jin merely remains silent to assist him. Mu Huai finds that intriguing and inquires if Mu Jin dispatched them. She replies no, they arrived on their own. Mu Huai replies, then he'll disregard them. That's when they express it. They don't wish to be instructed. By someone inferior to them. Mu Huai remains quiet, then states Mount Hua's structure has decayed. And if they question his power, he'll demonstrate it. One blow, the girl is unarmed and on her knees. Another blow, another hit, the boy falls down too. They're defeated. Hours later, battered and fatigued, they concede failure. Mu Huai inquires if he met expectations. They respond affirmatively. He questions if they still believe. He inquires if they still believe he's less strong than Mu Jin. They respond no. Content, he instructs them to relax. Morning practice is approaching. Meanwhile, Ryan questions if the duo is genuinely earnest. Elsewhere, Ryan inquires whether the duo is genuinely committed to being defeated by Mu Huai. One of them responds that this was not. The elder disciple they were familiar with. San concurs, stating that he is evidently very distinct now. And that halting him is not something that can be tried recklessly. Unbeknownst to them, Jin has eavesdropped on the whole discussion. Approaching, he inquires of the remaining disciple what transpired between the boy and the girl. Ryan responds that nothing significant happened. They simply disapprove of the notion of the senior disciple directing the next day's training. A few moments later, Ryan offers additional information. Jin says he comprehends and that he will converse with the duo later. Even if Mu Huai is just defending himself, Jin believes he will withdraw. Jin thinks he will withdraw once he understands he is not fit for the position. For that reason, attempting to eliminate him without his knowledge is not the optimal choice. Astonishingly, Ryan asserts they were merely concerned. Jin replies that he will manage the issue himself, then strolls away, leaving Ryan feeling uncomfortable. then strolls off, leaving Ryan feeling uncomfortable. The following day, the main character stands in front of his new pupils, resolute to provide a justification for his transformation. Resolved to provide a justification for his alteration, he states that prior to their commencement, there are several matters he must discuss. There are several matters he must tackle. From below, Jean ponders whether Mu Huai had been concealing his skills sufficiently to harm San and Ho so badly. Sufficient to harm San and Ho so seriously, or if he obtained assistance from Chael. In both scenarios, he determines that the reality will disclose itself eventually. Will disclose itself sooner or later. By the way, Mu Huai performs the training, surprising everyone. He states that they are far too feeble. He states that they are far too feeble. While there may be numerous causes for someone to become powerful, there is only one cause for frailty. There is solely one cause for frailty, a deficiency of fundamentals. That is the reason, from that instant onward, they will practice only the 6th dual sword combination method in the mornings before progressing to more advanced techniques. Before progressing to more sophisticated methods. Abruptly, an individual interjects. All eyes shift toward the sound. It is Ryan furiously inquiring what is amiss with desiring to learn more quickly. Convinced that no one else there can achieve it, trusting that no one else around can achieve it, he proclaims that he will tackle the challenge himself. His statements leave the disciples astonished. Unfazed, Mu Huai comments that everything here is chaotic. Unperturbed, Mu Huai comments that everything here is a chaos, muttering numerous things under his breath. Serenely, he informs Ryan that if he has grievances, he ought to ascend the stairs. Everyone is astonished both by the senior disciples. Everyone is astonished both by the senior pupils and by Ryan's response. Without delay, Ryan starts ascending the stairs. Without reluctance, Ryan starts ascending the stairs. Once at the summit, the young man states that he comprehends what Mu Huai signifies, but does not think it is correct to forsake their ongoing training, particularly under Mu Huai's guidance, which, as everyone is aware, Mu Huai interrupts him, declaring that he is fully conscious that everyone thinks his martial arts abilities are poor, and he also understands the true reason Ryan advanced. He's present to demonstrate precisely that. Mu Huai elevates his voice. And instructs everyone to focus. From this instant on, he won't take a single stride. He'll employ solely the 6th dual sword method. He'll employ only the 6th dual blade method to defend against Ryan's strikes. No motion, no footwork. If Ryan succeeds in contacting him with his sword, if Ryan succeeds in striking him with his sword or compelling him to shift even once, Mu Huai will retract everything he stated. Mu Huai will retract everything he mentioned and resign from directing morning training. The disciples are astonished. The followers are astonished. Ryan inquires if he isn't being too rash, merely because he defeated Mu San and Mu Ho. Mu Huai responds serenely. From what he observed, the two were gravely hurt, and since Ryan insists on confronting him, Ryan lunges ahead without reluctance. Just like Mu Huai assured, he deflects the blow without moving an inch. Down below, the disciples halt, jaws dropped as the confrontation persists. Jaws agape as the battle persists. The noise of swords reverberates incessantly. Ryan exerts himself more and more, investing all he possesses into the struggle, pouring all he possesses into the battle. One student identifies the method instantly. The focused wind blade technique. The focused wind blade method. A rapid-paced style and Ryan's forte among all second-generation followers. Observing intently, Chael perceives it as well. Ryan is swifter than earlier, but it makes no difference. Ryan is swifter than prior, but it doesn't signify. Mu Huai obstructs every single blow with immense simplicity. While shielding, Mu Huai nonchalantly remarks. While protecting, Mu Huai casually remarks that Ryan is more bothersome than the other two. He truly has to utilize shoulder strength this time. He truly has to utilize shoulder power this time. Then he ridicules him. Is that genuinely all he's capable of? Ryan grits his teeth. He confesses it, he's exasperated. But this is his boundary. He acknowledges it, he's exasperated. But this is his boundary. He doesn't know what more to do. Someone in the audience murmurs if that's truly the senior apprentice they once knew. After all, he hasn't shifted a bit. After all, he hasn't shifted an inch. Mu Jin observes in astonishment, eyes wide. How is this even feasible? Suddenly, it appears that Ryan strikes a blow. Abruptly, it appears that Ryan strikes a blow, but in his own reflections, he understands the reality. That wasn't a triumph, it was validation. That wasn't a triumph, it was validation. Mu Huai then clarifies calmly. It's not that he's powerful. It's not that he's powerful. It's that when someone becomes fixated on hitting, their footwork deteriorates. And once that occurs, the blade becomes insignificant. That's why even while hurt, he could obstruct everything without shifting. He informs Ryan he'll illustrate what it signifies to wield a sword using the whole body. And then it occurs, one strike. And then it occurs, one hit. The impact is so precise, so overpowering, that the whole training area goes quiet. From above, Mu Huai commands Mu San and Mu Ho. From above, Mu Huai instructs Mu San and Mu Ho to transport Ryan to the infirmary. Then he faces the others. Then he shifts to the others, instructs them to cease gazing, and lift their swords. The protagonist declares that morning practice. The main character declares that morning practice will now commence. Next, we observe him rectifying every minor error his new pupils commit. We're transported to the past when our boy inquired Ryan. We're transported to the past when our lad inquired Ryan why he selected Huai as a pupil. The young man merely states Huai is quite ordinary, but he's never witnessed him surrender on anything. Dako questions if his companion picked the boy. Dako inquires if his companion selected the lad solely for his resolve. A tad melancholic, Ryan replies that skilled students attain martial awareness independently. Attain martial enlightenment independently. But that's not the situation for Huai. And since molding a martial master from a common individual is a mentor's responsibility, he selected the boy. He selected the boy. Back in the current time, our boy states he enjoyed selecting a few skilled apprentices. Our lad says he adored to select a few skilled followers. But now he's the chief disciple guiding the second-generation followers of Mount Huai. Guiding the second-generation followers of Mount Huai. So he cannot abandon anyone even if doing so is much more exasperating than he anticipated. That's why if he encounters Ryan in the afterlife, the guy will adore him a truly excellent beverage. The fellow will adore him a truly excellent beverage. Even though deep inside, he merely wants to understand how the young man is faring. Since he consistently concentrated on enhancing himself rather than looking after his companions. Attempting to console himself, our lad deduces that Ryan must be well since he seldom lost battles, and states it would be pleasant to see his companion again someday. After a couple of days, we discovered that the appropriate instruction of the second-generation pupils is progressing well. Of the second-generation followers is proceeding smoothly, even though it's been a challenging path as they had to begin from nothing. Still, Huai is certain that the plum blossoms will flourish through all the adversity. Will flourish through all the adversity? Strolling through the redwood forest, he states he also has a lengthy path ahead. Since his initial strides to transform the Mount Huai sect must commence with elevating his own martial realm. Must commence with elevating his own combat domain. The perceptions are one of the most crucial elements in that procedure. Because the keener they are, the simpler it becomes to observe minor alterations. Something that aids significantly in combat sports training. Something that assists greatly in martial arts practice. And even though he sensed nothing when he initially opened his eyes in that form, now he's convinced that someone is observing him. But not in a menacing way, just out of interest. Just out of inquisitiveness. Still, the main character can't quite discern who it is yet. That's something he plans to discover shortly. After a while strolling, Hwai arrives at his goal. Inside the shrine, we observe Hyun Gak, who seemingly knows the previous possessor of Daiko's new form quite well. Bowing welcoming our lad states he's there to learn the hidden methods. Although curious, the man replies it's all right. Though fascinated, the man states it's acceptable. He merely requests the boy to be cautious and not overexert himself since he's still not completely recovered. The main character says he'll be cautious. Then Gak notes he heard that one of his students was disrespectful to the boy, that one of his followers was impolite to the boy. Perplexed, our boy ponders who the man is referring to since he'd be considering 3 different individuals, swiftly concluding that it doesn't matter much. That it doesn't signify much. Just then, Hyun astonishes him by expressing regret, stating Musa only acted on what he thought was worthwhile. With a grin, the man even mentions that in another era the boy would have encountered far graver repercussions. Without uttering a word, the protagonist understands that seemingly he won't encounter any problems. He then states he merely did what he needed to do so the man doesn't have to be concerned about anything. Astonished, Gak ponders if he truly just heard those phrases emerge from Huey's lips. And if his gaze were consistently that keen. In his mind, our lad ponders why on earth he's being gazed at like that. Why the heck he's being gazed at like that? Grinning, Gak states he's pleased to see the young man is caring for his folks. The youthful man is caring for his people and that, in that situation, he's permitted to continue. Observing the main character walk away, the man ponders how someone who lost his mentor can still be so filled with resolve. A few moments later, we see the protagonist. A couple of moments later, we observe the main character attempting to determine what the initial actions are to elevate his own martial domain and what on earth a martial domain even is. Since the explanation he understands is incorrect. We discover that existence and demise in the Jiang. Who aren't determined solely by the power of martial arts. What truly counts when it comes to survival is the capability to utilize the martial arts you've acquired as well as swift and accurate judgment and reasoning. That's why a martial domain is the expertise of martial arts along with the knowledge of combat sports along with the experience and knowledge that accompany it. This was the definition of martial domain that Daiko attained after ceaseless training and reflection. That's why the initial steps to enhance one's domain commence with genuinely comprehending combat sports. Start with genuinely comprehending martial arts. Sitting while perusing, the main character ponders what martial arts are associated with the Manhwa sect. But after reflecting for a moment, he recognizes he has no clue. He understands he has no clue. Since there are matters he still isn't permitted to read as they're limited to prevent avaricious students from bypassing crucial stages. From omitting crucial steps. Reflecting on that, our lad determines that Mount Hua is on the more forgotten side. That Mount Hua is on the more secluded side. But even so, it has a structured set of martial arts that aren't difficult to comprehend, like the 6-sword combination method, the focused wind sword method, the plum blossom sword method and the sword of 1,000 fragrances, and the blade of 1,000 scents. After mastering those 3 methods, it then becomes feasible to uncover the mysteries of the plum blossom blade. And only then can one commence studying. And solely then can one commence studying the supreme martial skill in the sect referred to as Mount Hua's hallmark technique. Consuming the book elevates the motivating power. Consuming the book houses the motivating power behind the group that became one of the most famous deceptions in the mysteries of these sword techniques. In the mysteries of these blade styles. And gossip has it that the finest swordsman in the sect perfected more than one of the 3 plum blossom sword methods. Since the initial technique is the foundations, since the initial method is the roots, the subsequent 3 are the trunk and the secrets constitute the branches. Ultimately, in the Sword of 7 Blossoms, the 3-inch sword and the clear plum blossom sword are the flowers of the tree. Closing the book, the main character concludes that he has attained the trunk and even if he desired to reach the branches, he would require the plum blossom sword, which is granted only to those acknowledged. Which is granted solely to those acknowledged as martial arts experts. As he vocalizes something, someone inquires if he's alluding to the plum blossom blade. It's behind you who'll travel silently. It's back you who'll travel silently. Our lad rises and salutes the sect chief. The individual states he arrived to discover why someone had remained there for so long. Someone had been present for so long. Then inquires if the protagonist minds if he takes a seat for a while. Naturally, the boy replies that he doesn't. While contemplating to himself that he hadn't. While pondering to himself that he hadn't observed how late it was and that Gak had illuminated candles for him. Curious, you inquire if the young man. Fascinated, you inquire if the young man truly read all that. Our lad replies affirmatively. Our lad says yes. The gentleman then states he's heard about the modifications in the disciple's education and inquires if he's the teacher. Once more, the main character affirms. Inquisitive, the chief asks. Inquisitive, the chief wonders why he's concentrating on the six-blade fusion method. Why he's concentrating on the six-sword fusion method. Reflecting, the man remembers how he used to waver even with straightforward inquiries. But now he's accomplishing things he never attempted before. Meanwhile, the protagonist begins to doubt the man is likely there just to see how things are progressing after his demise and whether he's pretending to be fine. And whether he's pretending to be fine. So it's preferable to provide you the response he desires. Before getting directly to the matter, the protagonist reiterates the inquiry, then mentions that he's acting as he is because the second-generation apprentices began on the wrong path and it would have been improved. And it would have been preferable if they had never begun at all. Despite the leader's astonished demeanor, our boy believes he must already understand how dreadful the disciples are, how awful the followers are, so they'll likely assume they share similar thoughts which will benefit him. The issue is that what he is unaware of is that he was considering Qui's situation is much worse than he envisioned. Is much worse than he envisioned. Perplexed, the leader ponders if the youngster before him is the same one he once knew since he was very naive and would never speak poorly of anyone. With his mind whirling, the man ponders if this alteration is because of all that occurred. But prior to it, he can express anything. The main character states everyone already understands. Without comprehending anything, the elder inquires what he's discussing. Our boy then states that all second-generation apprentices are well acquainted with the six-sword combination method. Are quite acquainted with the six-sword combination method. However, if they evaluate everyone's performance from when they were still studying, they'll notice that things have only deteriorated. They'll notice that matters have merely deteriorated. Curious, you inquire what the cause of that might be. Clarifying, Boy states that intimacy and factions in Jianghu possess distinct perspectives and philosophies. These inherently merge with martial arts. So a sex martial academy is a manifestation of that group's philosophy. For instance, the Taiji Fist of the winning sect and its awakened sword technique, or the Crimson Dawn attack of Qinqing sects as your cloud. That's why studying a martial arts academy. Is not merely about conditioning the physique, but also investigating and comprehending the sexual philosophy. Without displaying much response, the elder can only contemplate how composed the young man is. The elder can merely contemplate how serene the young man is. He strongly resembles Hyunjo. Still clarifying, the protagonist states the second-generation disciples are concentrated exclusively on causing the plum blossom to flourish. You then inquire what he suggests to alter that. Without delay, the protagonist states he must make everyone understand that mastering the sex signature technique is not the actual aim of a martial school, but instead practice endlessly to investigate and comprehend the philosophy and then implement it in everyday life. That's why the plum blossom isn't precisely the conclusion of everything. Of all things. The elder's gaze expands as he comprehends how much Wei resembles the departed disciple. Not in looks but in insight. You ponder if he's the sole one. You ponder if he's the sole one who can perceive the skill in that child. Concurring with everything the protagonist mentioned, the man observes that he reflects very profoundly. The individual comments that he contemplates very profoundly despite being so youthful. Wei then states he now plans to direct the apprentices in practice with the six-sword combination method. In practice with the six-sword fusion method. Back states he has no uncertainty the boy will perform admirably, but would like to understand what direction he plans to pursue. The inquiry surprises our boy unexpectedly. The inquiry surprises our lad unexpectedly. Reflecting, he states that after examining the combat techniques of Mount Wei's faction, he understood they're all excellent. He understood they're all fine. But he also discovered some aspects disheartening, like the truth that they emphasize being powerful solely for existence, or the truth that they don't employ fighting strategies or bigger, larger blades, or weightier, bigger swords. Even attempting to restrain himself, the protagonist determines that he won't be able to, even if it startles him, even if it surprises him. Aloud, he deceives and merely states he doesn't wish to stroll a very magnificent route because he plans to accomplish the things. Because he plans to accomplish the tasks his master wished to undertake and assume his position. After all, persisting on his master's journey. After all, persisting on his mentor's journey and exceeding him as a pupil's obligation. Astonished, you state he comprehends. Astonished, you state he comprehends, alluding to observing Hien in Hawaii. Which is not due to the boy's skill. Which is not due to the boy's skill, but because of his determination to pursue his master's route. But due to his desire to pursue his mentor's route. Reflecting, he states that developing a new combat method is not a simple endeavor. Is no simple job. Nevertheless, he is quite proud of the young man positioned before him. Grinning, he states aloud that Hien. Grinning, he declares aloud that Hien would undoubtedly be proud, and our lad expresses gratitude. The man then contemplates that his concerns have transformed into optimism. Mentioning next that the winter snowfall is chilly. Declaring next that the winter frost is chilly, but the fragrance of the plum flowers that withstand the cold and blossom is far more intense. That withstand the chill and flourish is much more resilient. And even if he wasn't capable of safeguarding the plum flowers that blossomed on Mount Wei, the plum flowers that blossomed on Mount Wei, a tiny bud stayed so from that instant on, his responsibility would be to make that bud flourish. His responsibility would be to make that bud flourish. Out of nowhere, you state loudly that there are numerous other blossoms besides the plum blossom on Mount Wei. Then he inquires if the boy understands why they selected that one specifically. That one specifically. The main character states he doesn't. Being enigmatic, the elder mentions he'll discover much if he contemplates that. If he contemplates on that. He swiftly rises to depart. After taking a few strides, you state he neglected to mention something. He then discloses that he also misplaced his master. He then discloses that he also lost his mentor. But nonetheless, he can't claim he completely comprehends who he's grieving. Who he's grief. However, the boy shouldn't view Hien's demise as a conclusion, but rather as a commencement to do what he would have desired. In quietude, the protagonist reflects that actually isn't such a poor notion. That truly isn't such a poor notion. He then expresses gratitude for the dialogue rich with insight. By himself, Dago recalls the past when someone mentioned he lived very delicately. Besides being conceited and impulsive, aside from being conceited and rash, which are two ideal traits when it comes to developed muscle, the enigmatic man then inquires if he wishes to attempt a new method of training. We revert to the current moment. We revert to the current instant where, in the morning, the main character appears to be practicing in the manner that man instructed him. Appears to be educating in the manner that man instructed him. Reflecting, he claims he didn't anticipate his meeting with the Iron Fist King of the Mountain to be so beneficial, as he imparted a rather harsh but highly efficient training technique that will demonstrate outcomes swiftly. Abruptly, someone shouts and announces it's time. Unexpectedly, someone shouts and states it's time. Not comprehending anything, our boy inquires what the girl is referring to. Our lad inquires what the girl is discussing. With her eyes sparkling, the young lady states that the sect leader requested him to descend the mountain. We observe the elders' temple. We observe the seniors' temple, where an individual mentions the upcoming version is regarding the third-generation followers. Is regarding the third-generation followers. You, consenting, state the issue is they lack time to choose such followers due to Ashanti slaughter. Due to Ashanti slaughter. One of the seniors then states it would be intriguing to welcome some followers from outside factions to demonstrate that they are thriving. Neither consenting nor opposing. Neither consenting nor dissenting. Another man inquires if it wouldn't be preferable to dispatch a disciple to examine the external sector of Shangxi. On the outside sector of Shangxi. Since another unconventional coalition where malevolent group is likely attempting to occupy the power void. Attempting to occupy the power void. We discover that outside groups are situated beyond the combat halls established to instruct the martial techniques of Mount Huesa sect. To instruct the combat techniques of Mount Huesa sect. That's why the impact of an outside sect arises from the reputation and accomplishments of the primary sect. In consideration, you state it makes sense for the external sects to be more concerned after what transpired. But first they need to decide which disciple to dispatch. Taking charge, the leader asserts this issue can no longer be delayed. He then proposes that they send a second-generation disciple. A second-generation follower. Worried, Shang states the external world is still chaotic. He then mentions that in that situation they can select some of the most skilled disciples, including Huidi, grinning. Jean states he enjoys the concept. But everyone is astonished that you brought up the lad. Shang mentions he doesn't particularly favor the notion of dispatching the youth. But the leader claims he's transformed significantly over the last month. Over the previous month. And he's confident the boy will be okay. We're brought to the city of Posen where the main character and 3 other followers gather. Believing our lad claims it's a tiny village with nothing captivating except for the beverages. Suddenly the long-haired girl. Unexpectedly the long-haired girl draws his focus to display a poultry meal. Yes, seemingly they've never consumed chicken in that manner. That way. Jean then informs Mu-Wan not to overlook that they're donning the Mount Huisek's uniform while she salivates. The girl states she understands, but swiftly adds that now she detects lamb. Then she inquires how they could not desire such delicious food. Suddenly someone collides forcefully with Hua. Her large eyes enlarge in astonishment. Her large eyes expand in astonishment. Swiftly, everyone begins gazing at the impolite guy. Fly lifts his arm and Jean inquires what he's doing. The man then questions if it's the initial time those plum flowers are in Jingshu. He then states the girl ought to apologize since she collided with him. Hua yells that he was the one who collided with her. While the protagonist considers those individuals must be from some illicit group. Likely the one that filled the authority void left by the external sect of Shangxi. Nevertheless, it doesn't add up for them to be impolite unless they have the support of someone influential. Not wishing to get directly engaged, the protagonist determines that learning to handle that type of individuals will be beneficial for his students. He then resolves to take initiative and demonstrate how it's accomplished. Aiming his sword at one of the men's eyes, he inquires where he believes he's gazing. He then states he realized from the beginning that it was the man who collided with the girl, but he chose to wait and observe how the guy would behave. And since he was impolite, he initiated a confrontation with the Mount Huiseks. Surprising the guys, astonishing the fellows unexpectedly, the main character adds that now he comprehends what Jingshu's underworld believes regarding the sect. Sweating anxiously, one of the men expresses regret, but our boy states he doesn't accept regrets. But our lad says he doesn't accept apologies from filth like him. And that, if he wants to prevent his companion from losing an eye, he better move aside right now. He best move aside immediately. Mouth agape, the man believes that evidently the boy truly will strike. Boy squints his eyes and continues gazing. Boy squints his eyes and continues gazing, causing the group to flee with their tails between their legs. Hua expresses regret, and as he sheathes his sword, the protagonist states she doesn't need to express regret. The main character states she doesn't have to say sorry since it was the guy who was to blame, and since he understands everyone must be astonished by the circumstance. He'd like to propose they locate and in first consume something. The girl and another disciple are pleased with the notion, but Jean remains quiet, reflecting on how he was the first to apologize for his companion, even though it was those men who initiated everything, all because he was too concerned about how they should conduct themselves. Unlike Hui, who appears aware of everything occurring around him and reacted like he's accustomed to that type of situation. Even if he's merely feigning, meanwhile, our boy can only think that he should have stabbed the man. Unaware of anything, Jean vows to himself that he'll strive harder so that something like this doesn't occur again, and so that no one else will look down on them, and so that no one else will scorn them. The team reaches the inn, and the main character instantly hurriedly places an order for a multitude of items, causing the server to feel anxious. A couple of moments later, we observe a stack of vacant plates in Hua who appears entirely filled. Our lad inquires if she will consume less due to the training, but he responds that in fact he merely ate too much. Indeed he merely consumed too much. Curious, what inquires what else are going to do that day since the SEC leader didn't mention what the objective was. That after the protagonist asks what significant things had occurred so far, she recalls everything they've accomplished. She recollects everything they've accomplished. With broad eyes, the girl reminisces about the underworld. Hui then states that since the leader granted them complete power, he was considering imparting a lesson to the underworld scoundrels. Night swiftly descends in the city, and still within the inn the group strategizes how to execute the mission. The team strategizes how to execute the task. Jean suggests it's wiser for them to collect some information on the individuals before taking any action. Everyone appears to concur with the young man's proposal. Thus, the main character inquires of the trio. So the main character requests the group to collect all the details they can about the underworld by the next evening. In the meantime, he'll stroll around the city. In disguise and move awkwardly. In concealment and move awkwardly. We're brought to the underworld, a location where those who engage in unethical deeds and possess distorted beliefs or ideas dwell, and maintain distorted convictions or ideas exist. However, there's a distinction between the underworld inhabitants and the numerous martial practitioners within the orthodox factions, including sinister ones. One of the men encircling a woman states the interest rate lately increased, but they neglected to mention that. Thus, she can settle with something different. So she can settle with something else. From this, we discover that the underworld individuals are in pursuit of wealth, enjoyment, or merely the inexpensive excitement of control. And they resemble the groups that murder for gain. Thus, the underbelly refers to goons. Thus, the underworld pertains to criminals who lead their lives in a low-cost and dirty manner. Enveloped in a large robe, enveloped in a big cape, Hui states he isn't certain if those men are haughty or merely uninformed, if those men are conceited or just uninformed. Astonished, one of the fellows inquires who he is and where Yungbong is since he was meant to be on guard. Another man states he likely went out exploring, but we see that's not entirely accurate. But we observe that's not precisely accurate. Indifferently, the main character inquires who they trust to behave like that. Perplexed, the bald man asks. The bald man inquires if the boy is attempting to provoke a confrontation. But if not, you ought to simply turn around and remove his intrusive self from there. Shielding his face, our lad states he arrived to locate them for an alternate purpose. The long-haired fellow inquires what the devil he's referring to. But prior to him being able to utter anything else, he receives a knee to the face that propels him away. Mouth agape, the bald man inquires why the lad did that. Mouth ajar, the bald man inquires why the boy did that. Without uttering a sound, we begin assaulting the man already on the floor. We begin striking the man already on the ground until he leaves him entirely insensible. But won't it seize the opportunity to liberate herself? But won't it seize the opportunity to liberate herself and leaves the bald man solitary? The protagonist then states he appears to have acquired some subpar martial arts, so he'd like to observe him in action. But if he wishes to survive, but if he desires to survive, he can simply surrender his wallet. Elsewhere, we observe another man urinating. Elsewhere, we observe another man urinating. Sitting at a table, two men inquire if he's going to do that constantly. Two guys inquire if he's going to perform that constantly, stating they'll both be clear-headed by the time he's finished. Rolling his eyes, the elderly man completes what he's doing and says it's truly bothersome. What he's doing and states it's truly irritating. And neither he nor the two observe that there are two deceased men bound to a tree. The man merely remarks that a fellow in a cloak was present a few moments ago and took a lot of food to go. We're brought back to the city. We're transported back to the city where Hua converses with a resident in pursuit of details. Attempting a different approach. Attempting a different tactic, she'll conceal herself behind a barrier to overhear discussions. She'll conceal herself behind a barrier to overhear discussions. Meanwhile, Jim acts like just a man enjoying a beverage so he can observe closely. So he can observe up close. Distant from there, in a different region, someone remarks that they detect pork and spring rolls. Someone remarks that they detect pork and spring rolls. A mustached fellow states he doesn't know who that jerk is, but he must be insane to appear there with food. But he must be insane to appear there with food. Unable to restrain themselves, individuals start moving toward Hua. Individuals start moving forward to Hua, who unsheathes his sword and cuts through the air, stating he's not present to distribute food, so anyone who attempts to handle the bags will rue it. So anyone who attempts to handle the bags will lament it. One of the men states the boy is genuinely remarkable and apologizing, presents himself as Sojinga from the beggars faction. Our boy sheathes his sword. Our lad sheathes his blade and presents himself too. The man then states that his faction regards what occurred to the sword song of Mount Hua a shame. He then inquires what leads him there. Getting directly to the matter, the protagonist replies and wishes to learn more about the underworld inhabitants, and desires to discover more about the underworld inhabitants. And since the meal will spoil if it becomes chilly, it ought to converse while dining. Chuckling, Jinga remarks that's fascinating. A while later, Hua finds out that the underworld individuals. Sometime afterward, Hua discovers that the underworld individuals are part of the blood-violent faction which seized the authority void left by the Huari sect and the external division of the Hua sect. The chief of the beggars sect states what distinguishes them. The chief of the beggars group states what distinguishes them is that the individuals in this faction genuinely know combat skills. Our lad claims he comprehends, but now they must discuss what is genuinely significant. Like for instance, who is behind the faction? Like for instance, who is behind the group? Curious, the elderly man inquires why he believes there's someone influential behind the establishment. Clarifying, our lad states he believes that since posting is rather extensive compared to other locations. Because publishing is rather extensive compared to other locations, and yet a mere group managed to dominate the city, which indicates someone intelligent is very interested in the authority void. After all, what would be typical is for dozens. After all, what would be typical is for dozens of criminal groups to split authority over sections of the city and rival one another. Astonished, Jinga states it's difficult to trust the boy. Astonished, Jinga states it's difficult to accept the lad is merely a budding follower new to Jingu. Is merely a emerging apprentice new to Jingu. He then states he hadn't mentioned it previously because he required confirmation of something. The boy claims he can talk now. Complying with the beggar discloses that there's a combatant who often communicates with the blood-violent faction. Who often communicates the blood-violent group, and that this individual is part of the Gaius sword sect. We discover that this is one of the primary organizations. We discover that this is one of the principal organizations in Shangxi, but even though it's strong, in Shangxi, but even though it's strong, it's never concerned about Mount Hoa sect or the Zhong'an sect and is also lesser than those two. Considering the protagonist mentions something still feels strange. Jinga states he's not sure the mastermind is in the Gyu's sword sect. Is in the Gyu's sword faction. Conceding our lad states that if that were the situation, they wouldn't mind about looks, so he doesn't trust the faction is genuinely engaged. But nonetheless, he's eager to find out who the martial artist is. But even so, he's eager to discover who the martial artist is. The beggar then states you neglected to mention that he suspects the Red Wolf sword belongs to the Gaius sword sect. Belongs to the Gaius sword faction, and judging by the boy's response, appears he's heard that title previously. Appears he's listened to that name previously. So it's wise to be cautious before taking any action. In his reflections, Y discloses that in reality, he's never encountered this individual before. He's never known of this individual before. The following day at the inn, we observe the protagonist contemplating as he gazes out the window. We discover that, even after an extensive discussion, he didn't collect much data regarding the Red Wolf sword. We return to previous instances. when he inquired Jinga if the fluid in the mug was truly just tea. While contemplating, it would merely require a bit of whimsy. With the man to elicit more specifics. However, he didn't take into account one significant element. Which was the amazing flavor of that wine. Chuckling, the beggar says it appears he enjoyed it, and it doesn't even seem like it's his initial time in Django. After that, our lad forgot everything and continued drinking. So he didn't obtain the information he required. The details he required. And even though he has a vague notion of how he'll behave, he doesn't know what decisions the adversaries will take. He then determines that he still has some time. To savor the wine he carried to the room. Meg swiftly tumbles, and we observe the other three followers questioning what that scent of liquor is. Curious what that scent of alcohol is in front of them stands Wei. Folding his arms, he inquires what they discovered. Moving ahead, Hua states she initially wanted to know. Stepping ahead, Hua states she initially enjoyed to find out if he was present consuming beverages while they were working. Laboring. Our lad states no and reiterates his earlier inquiry. Jean mentions they discovered the underworld inhabitants occupied the power void and now dominate poison. Hua adds that they're all evil, always resorting to aggression to obtain what they desire. Chiu then states the issue is that they've acquired combat skills, which even if mediocre are extremely perilous when employed against individuals who lack fighting knowledge. The main character commends the trio for their excellent effort. Disclosing that he also uncovered something they must focus on, which is how the underworld individuals acquired martial arts. After all, they're individuals who would never handle a book. They'd prefer to use the pages as fuel, which indicates someone instructed them. Rising, our lad states he discovered who's accountable, but not the motive behind it. Inquisitive, Jean inquires who the individual is. Getting directly to the matter, Hua states it's the Red Wolf sword from the Nine Hells sword sect. It's the Red Wolf blade from the Nine Hells blade sect. Astonished, Jean ponders how they're not merely handling a few offenders. Stiffening down again, the protagonist states he was considering establishing an ambush to eliminate them. Hearing that renders the long-haired boy voiceless. Chiu then remarks he also doesn't understand. Chiu then states he also doesn't understand why the sect would be assisting wrongdoers, but it'd be preferable to notify the elders first. Without displaying much response, the protagonist inquires if he's certain about that. Contradicting her allies, Opposing her associates, Hua states she concurs with the senior disciple since they must confront the issue directly. Since they must confront the issue directly. Even though he opposes, Jean stays quiet, believing they need to reflect on the present circumstances. Since Mount Hula is inundated with recuperating from the slaughter and engaging in another dispute could exacerbate matters, choosing to voice those opinions is quite perilous. Choosing to express oneself, the voices doing that is extremely perilous because it could ignite another conflict with a formidable faction. Hua states he comprehends his worry, but that none of that will occur because that's not how the Nine Hells Sword sect functions. After all, they would initiate a brawl. After all, they would initiate a conflict if they aimed to eradicate an organization rather than doing everything in secrecy. And with Mount Hula's present condition, they could assault and eliminate them at any instant. That's why he thinks the offenders aren't genuinely linked to the sect, and even if they are, they won't initiate a conflict with Mount Hula. Jean attempts to express something different, but our boy doesn't permit him. Nevertheless, the boy inquires if the details he received are trustworthy. The protagonist affirms yes because he conversed with individuals from the beggars sect. Because he conversed with individuals from the beggars group. With broad eyes, the disciple ponders if he truly signifies. With broad eyes, the follower ponders if he truly signifies. The group that embraces any vagrant as a member being the biggest association in terms of figures that utilizes its numerical benefit. That utilizes its numerical superiority to acquire sustenance and knowledge and also practices martial arts, and also understands combat techniques, which signifies any details that originate from them are reliable. Is reliable. Moving toward their goal, Jean determines that he's fretting for no reason, since we assure he attempted to settle matters amicably. Our lad informs everyone to prepare while contemplating that he can't reveal he's nervous or he'll turn into a liability. So it's preferable to commit fully. After witnessing the boy shatter the gate with a kick, Jean ponders what occurred to the tranquil strategy notion. Inside, the offenders inquire what the devil is happening. What the heck is happening? Stepping ahead, the main character states it's wonderful that they're all assembled there. Then requests for someone to notify the Red Wolf Sword and the group's leader to come outside, kneel and express regret. To step outside, kneel and express remorse if they wish to preserve their lives. Remaining the emblem on the protagonist's blade. Remaining the emblem on the hero's blade. The offenders comprehend they're contending with individuals from Mount Hua sect. Jean and Hua mention they didn't discover that passage very tranquil. Jean and Hua claim they didn't discover that entrance very tranquil. But Kue asserts that's the correct method to manage matters in Jianggu. Abruptly, someone emerges inquiring what all the commotion is. Abruptly, an individual shows up inquiring about the commotion. One of the offenders informs the elderly man that Mount Hua sect's members are present. That Mount Hua sect's individuals are present. Contemplating to himself, the elderly man ponders if that's truly feasible as he gazes at the group of four standing before him. As he gazes at the group standing in front of him, realizing they're merely children, the elderly man asks if they're attempting to perish. Then remarks that he'll overlook it. Then mentions that he'll allow it to pass because they're with a significant visitor. The main character then states, in fact, the ones will perish. Truly the ones will perish if they continue speaking in that manner. Astonished, the man states that if he realized who his individuals were dealing with, he'd be more cautious with his language. He then commands the group to reveal the quartet. He then instructs the group to demonstrate to the quartet just how frightening the Jianggu can be, but without harming anyone. The men swiftly assume position and unsheath their blades. However, something grabs one's notice. Up ahead, the young lady observes what seems to be an harmed couple, with the man cradling the woman in his arms. With the man embracing the woman in his arms. That's the ultimate straw for the disciple who rushes in without a moment's hesitation to attempt to rescue those unfortunate individuals. to attempt to rescue those unfortunate individuals. We observe that the man critically injured is no longer inhaling, but the woman still has her eyelids shut. The remaining disciples promptly hurry over to Hua. The remainder of the followers swiftly hurry over to Hua because two offenders are about to assault her. Demonstrating she's not feeble, a girl unleashes her bamboo leaf hand method. A girl releases her bamboo leaf hand method, which sends the foes soaring. Approaching, Jean states she can't simply dash off like that. Yelling, Hua exclaims they need to get those individuals to a physician. Rising, one of the men inquires who mentioned she could accomplish that. He then asserts that although they're from Mount Hua, there are still a limited number of them. Just one synchronized assault would be sufficient to overcome them, would be sufficient to conquer them. The yelling attracts the focus of the gang chief. Pondering to himself, the protagonist deduces that the girl had been concealing her genuine power during practice. He then instructs Kwa to grab her sword and clean the ground with everyone present instead of utilizing the weapon as ornamentation. In the meantime, Meanwhile, the chief of the offenders ponders why the lad didn't dash in to assist like the others. He determines that the boy must be self-assured, so he won't have the courage to confront him alone. But will assist the others so they can all battle together. Hua states that even though the man rushed in, he wasn't truly the one he desired. However, since it's his student's first experience in Jingu, it signifies no one here knows anything. It signifies no one here understands anything, much less that offenders battle unfairly and spit on their adversaries, since victory is all that counts. But this time there's no one to safeguard them, which indicates the trio will have to discover that existence and demise in Jiang, who aren't determined solely by martial advancement, who aren't determined solely by combat training. Without shifting a muscle, our lad demonstrates that this is nothing more than one of his teachings. He then observes that matters appear to be distinct for kill. We witness the boy halt an adversary with merely one hand and leave another one clearly unsettled. Nevertheless, the bald man chooses to strike with his sword, with his blade, but he's obstructed too, and after receiving the blow, he collapses entirely insensible to the floor. Kill casts a sinister look at the offender. Kill gives a sinister stare to the offender who is observing the brawl. Suddenly the gang chief rushes toward Hua, claiming that evidently he's the simplest adversary, stating that seemingly he's the simplest rival, so he'll look after him first. Unfortunately for him, with a single blow our boy lands half his body into a pit in the earth. Astonished, the other offenders, noticing the chief is down, and begin inquiring what they're meant to do now. Abruptly someone states all they need to do is choose another chief. Anyone if you eliminate the Mount Hubrats. Anyone if you slay the Mount Hubrats. Our quartet understands that this is the individual recognized as the Red Wolf Sword. Referred to as the Red Wolf Sword. Taunting the main character says he was curious when the handsome lad would appear. He was pondering when the handsome lad would arrive. Astonished, the elderly man inquires if the lad is familiar with him, then states that being acknowledged by a youthful Mount Hua apprentice is a privilege. Hua then states that in fact he only learned about him yesterday, and expressing regret as he doesn't care to learn the names of the feeble. The elderly man states that a follower of Mount Hua should adhere to the traditional way, but the lad speaks like a sinister martial artist. Nevertheless, if that's how he wishes to behave, so be it. Leaping down from the balcony, the Red Wolf Sword states the protagonist will just have to exert himself to triumph. Will merely have to put in his utmost to triumph. Grasping his sword, our lad inquires what he signifies by putting in his all, because he's uncertain if the man is even powerful enough to manage that. Astonished, the elderly man inquires when the boy positioned himself behind him but receives a hard blow instead of an answer, but suffers a severe blow instead of receiving a response. To prevent plummeting to the earth like a bag of potatoes. he utilizes his sword's scabbard to spring into the air. Contemplating to himself, he ponders what on earth that velocity was, since he didn't even observe the boy's feet shift. Since he didn't even notice the boy's feet shift. And the most remarkable aspect is that the boy didn't even utilize his sword. Is that the lad didn't even utilize his sword. Attempting to comprehend, the elderly man concludes there's no way a young apprentice could be at a superior level than him. Meanwhile, we can only consider that there's nothing extraordinary stopping him from eliminating the red wolf sword, especially now since he desires to test his sword. Particularly now since he desires to evaluate his blade. After all, it's been a month since he's been practicing and studying the blend of Mount Hus combat techniques. Even though there's been no one who could gauge his advancement and execution. Who could evaluate his advancement and execution, that's why the elderly man in front of him becomes so precious, because even if he's not powerful enough, he's still something. Without reluctance, the white-haired man rushes ahead. Without reluctance, the white-haired man lunges ahead, but the protagonist evades, as if it's the simplest thing in the world. And after bending to evade another blow, he seizes the chance to retaliate. He seizes the chance to retaliate using the bamboo leaf hand, which propels the man airborne as he continues advancing. After narrowing the gap, our boy strikes again, leaving his rival entirely dazed. Attempting to recover stability. Attempting to restore equilibrium, the man ponders how the boy perceived his motions. He then deduces that this is the reason he couldn't match the young man's deeds, which implies that perhaps they truly are on distinct tiers, whether he wishes to confess it or not. Lifting his sword, the old man states he recognizes. Lifting his blade, the elderly man states he recognizes that the lad is not merely some gifted youth. That the lad is not merely some gifted youth, and expresses regret for having undervalued him, declaring immediately afterward that now he will give it his all. Declaring immediately afterward that now he will give it his all. Our lad stays motionless as his adversary nears. Halting halfway, the man initiates an assault that demonstrates why he's recognized as the Crimson Wolf Blade. Observing the unfolding events. Observing what's occurring, the trio of followers becomes anxious for what reason. But with a solitary blow of his blade. But with a single blow of his blade, our boy makes the great wolf disappear. He then declares that the method the man employed is intense, but it has numerous gaps. But it has numerous openings, and judging by the manner he utilized it, he hasn't even grasped the second half. Stuttering, the elderly man inquires how the youth understands that method, but it appears to be too late. But it appears to be too late, as we are already shutting down like a flash, compelling him to extend himself thin, attempting to defend. Compelling him to extend himself thin, attempting to shield. Even though he's perplexed, the man is certain he obstructed the assault, but swiftly understands the boy employed the deceptive sword method. That being his final thought. Before strawberry juice goes soaring. Before strawberry liquid goes soaring, leaving the offenders in astonishment. However, we discover the main character didn't slay his rival. However, we discover the protagonist didn't slay his adversary. He merely trimmed his hair. In astonishment, the man attempts to comprehend why he spared him and why he hadn't wielded his sword from the outset. And why he hadn't utilized his sword from the outset. Even so, he concludes those matters no longer count, because now he must determine how the boy can be so powerful and so youthful at the same time, and so skilled. Even more than him, despite being older. Furious, the Red Wolf Sword commands when not to underestimate him, because he's confronting the martial artist. Because he's confronting the fighter from the Nine Hells sword sect. Other wolves emerge and rush towards the protagonist. Other canines emerge and rush towards the protagonist, who swiftly responds with his blade to protect himself. Who swiftly retaliates with his blade to protect himself and attacks the elderly man across the combat zone. Everyone halts to observe the spectacle as the silver-haired man loses stability and yells. As the silver-haired man loses stability and yells, believing he was already training when the boy was born and kept practicing to be recognized for his martial arts. To be recognized for his combat skills. But now the youth has broken his years of labor as if they were insignificant. Rushing ahead in rage, the man shouts. Charging ahead in rage, the man shouts, questioning why his endeavors aren't acknowledged by why, but takes another strike and doesn't receive a response. but takes another cut and doesn't receive a response after several minutes with his head trapped in a hole. The chief of the offenders. The chief of the offenders finally regains awareness. Frightened, he begins coughing and inquires what on earth occurred. And inquires what the heck occurred. Gazing forward, he observes the crimson wolf blade howling before being hit straight in the throat. Injured, the man can merely convey astonishment. Injured, the man can merely convey astonishment. On the floor, the elderly man believes that nothing is as unjust as skill because all of his endeavors became a casualty of a boy's ability who undoubtedly practiced only a few hours each day. Who definitely practiced only a couple of hours each day. Unlike him, a martial artist from the Nine Hells sword sect, Why Observe is perplexed. Why Observe is perplexed as his rival chuckles and babbles. The elderly man then states the lad must be accustomed to receiving attention and that conquering him will only make him more recognized. So he should relish it. So he ought to relish it while it endures, since ultimately he'll perish just like him because the sect will pursue. Because the group will pursue whoever is accountable for his demise. The main character taunts him, stating that for someone on the brink of death. Stating that for an individual on the brink of death, he certainly converses a lot, and nudging the elderly man to turn him over indicates that the manner in which he speaks resembles someone who feels inadequate, which is logical for someone. Which is logical for someone who's a part of the Otherworld division. We discover that the Nine Hell Sword faction is separated into the Otherworld division, the Hell division, and the Despair division, known as the Three Pillars that uphold the faction. Referred to as the Three Pillars that uphold the sect. Nevertheless, the Otherworld unit gained no advantages and is the least powerful of them all, which indicates they were merely focusing on southern Shaanxi. Which signifies they were merely observing southern Shaanxi because the unit's objective during the conflict against the Savage Dragon faction was to protect headquarters and offer support. But the individuals of the group pursuing accolades began fabricating mission accounts. After listening to all this, the elderly man inquires how the main character knows everything. The elderly man inquires how the main character is aware of everything. Without responding, he states the man must believe that the Otherworld unit will retaliate for his demise, but regrettably they'll do nothing but conceal it. But sadly they'll do nothing but conceal it, since this would be the ideal chance for the other two units to defeat the Otherworld unit. With a grim expression, our boy states that even if they ascend Mount, who was pursuing retribution, he would never dread such a feeble group, since he was the one who once confronted. The Nine Hells sword sect alone. Hearing this causes the old man to widen his eyes. Listening to this causes the elderly man to enlarge his eyes, and it also attracts the focus of the criminal's chief. And it also grabs the focus of the criminal's chief, who chooses to hide his head back down. While no one has yet observed that he's awake contemplating, he states he didn't witness anything. He states he didn't notice anything, but suddenly a hand seizes his garments. It's Wei who easily hoists the man. It's Wei who effortlessly raises the man, then inquires why the heck he was still reclining instead of dealing with matters. Instead of managing matters. Afraid. The gang chief states he'll comply with whatever he's instructed. A short while later, inside the offender's residence, the main character and the other followers. The main character and the other followers read the notebooks, hold accounts of the gang's actions. Of the group's actions. With everyone quieted, he inquires if that's truly all they engage in. The chief replies affirmatively. Our lad then states that from that instant on, the taken cash will be restored to its legitimate proprietors, and furthermore they must eliminate the betting house that very evening, even if they're frightened. The man with the large brow remarks accomplishing all that in one night will be somewhat challenging, but upon noticing the look on Wei's face, he merely says they'll sort it out. The main character says he's actually mistaken about one aspect. The main character states he's indeed mistaken about one aspect, because the reason he didn't eliminate them all isn't compassion, but rather so the victims have someone to direct their rage towards, since the wrongdoing they committed is greater than death itself. Thus, they'll all have to exist serving those they injured for the remainder of their lives. With the guidance provided, Wei states. With the directions provided, Wei states that aside from the faction leader, the others may guide to execute their duties. Curious about what to inquire why our boy is going to act. Curious what inquire why our boy is going to do while the others observe the offenders. The protagonist merely states he has unresolved matters, and the girl then inquires if he's going to imbibe again. Embarrassed, he requests the girl to go monitor the men. She replies they'll be all right and that they'll depart immediately. Considering our boy thinks the girl comprehends quicker than he anticipated, but this time he's not keen on drinking. Perplexed, the faction leader questions why he had to remain upright. Wei states he can't deceive his sense of smell and lets direct him to the location where the wool tuber blossom is situated. To the location where the wool tuber blossom is situated, we discover that in his previous existence. We discover that in his previous life Dako roamed about seeking uncommon objects since he didn't have a companion to depend on and required a substantial amount of cash, which he also had to figure out how to generate independently. Which he also had to discover a method to earn on his own. However, uncommon items are termed that for a reason they're not simple to locate until one day. They're not simple to locate until one day while relaxing he uncovered the tuber blossom, which had a pungent and filthy scent that was indelible. Going down the stairs he perceives the fragrance. Descending the steps he observes the scent becoming more intense and intense while the chief states. Becoming more powerful and more powerful while the leader claims that the blossom is 200 years old and was meant to be seized by the red wolf sword. And was meant to be wielded by the red wolf blade, but now that's discovered a more suitable owner. The main character states he performed well but can depart now. By himself he reflects that with metal gates and rock barriers. Solitary, he believes that with metal gates and rock barriers, he won't need to fret about exercising energy flow, and even though a 200-year-old blossom isn't that impressive, it doesn't alter the reality that it's extremely precious. Unveiling a tiny container, Wei states it's time to relish a 200-year journey, but upon a more detailed inspection. To relish a 200-year stroll, but upon a nearer examination, he discovers the wolf flower is far larger than he envisioned, which signifies it must be. Then he envisioned, which signifies it must be at least 400 years ancient. Grasping the blossom in his hand, he states he never anticipated discovering it so effortlessly. He never envisioned discovering it so effortlessly, and since it doesn't seem appropriate to use it all by himself, he'll share the next object he locates. He'll reveal the subsequent object he discovers sometime afterwards. Still, at the offender's residence, something grabs the gang leader's focus, who rises from the table to observe. Who rises from the table to check what's happening through the window. Suddenly a set of boots emerges through the dust, and we see that it's quite a duo of men training. Confused, the man rushes to the boy. Perplexed, the man rushes to the boy and states he heard a very loud sound. Dismissing it, the protagonist replies it was nothing significant, then inquires if he's examining the book thoroughly. The man responds affirmatively, and that he was on that assignment just a few moments ago. Leaving, Wei states he'll verify later to ensure all the funds were returned correctly. To ensure all the cash was returned correctly. After bending, and with the main character walking away, the man states he truly is a cursed scoundrel. Apart from being a deceiver, since he claimed the sound wasn't significant even though he demolished a structure. Pondering, the man contemplates what the wolf blossom did to the boy to cause that to occur. Did to the lad to cause that occur. Still in the same evening, we observe the offenders brandishing sledgehammers while being observed by Chiu, who upon noticing one of the men remaining motionless inquires if he's truly certain there's time to relax on the other side, or instructs another fellow to rush since the sun is about to ascend. Elsewhere, someone inquires in astonishment if the man is truly donating that as a present. Bowing, the offender states that this is the cash. They obtained unjustly concealed a bit farther away. They coerced unjustly concealed a little farther away. Jinga believes he never envisioned Wei would be able to accomplish all that in merely 2 days. In just 2 days, and that he already anticipated the young man who requested the details to be exceptional. Who requested for the details to be peculiar, but this is excessive because Manhwa was indeed concealing a dragon. Suddenly our lad emerges behind him. Unexpectedly, our lad shows up behind him stating he's present to have a beverage because he became famished but didn't wish to do it by himself, so if you'd care to ask the gentleman to accompany him too, even though he's astonished to be asked to consume alcohol first thing in the morning. Jinga accepts the invitation, and later he inquires what the boy is interested in, clarifying the entire situation. Our boy states the present issue is the underworld divisions of the vicious blood faction who have solely resorted to crime. Who solely resorted to crime because they had no alternative means to endure so if he desires to rehabilitate them all. But he requires someone prepared to accept them. In way adds that the man doesn't have to fret because he'll manage everything including the shattering of the Danshins. The chief of the beggar faction states the boy never ceased to astonish him, and that he knows some traders who can look after the underworld individuals, and in addition to that he'll monitor the situation. Our boy expresses gratitude, but the man states he's the one who ought to be grateful for being welcomed to assist civilians. Shifting the topic, Jinga inquires. Shifting the topic, Jinga inquires how long Wei will remain and send him. He replies approximately 3 days. Inquisitive, the man questions if he's intending. Inquisitive, the man inquires if he's intending to handle the strongholds surrounding the city. The protagonist replies perhaps later that same evening. The main character says perhaps afterwards. That same evening we observe the city is rather vibrant. The conclusion, our lad presents beverages to the pupils and commends them for a task well executed. Surprised, Jinga inquires what that is. Why then states he made bamboo leaf alcohol to celebrate everyone. The boy mentions they don't consume. The lad states they don't consume alcohol, but the main character asserts that indeed it's permitted when there's something to commemorate. It's permitted when there's something to commemorate, and since many new followers tend to perish during their initial genuine event, they should honor the fact that they're still living. Particularly after battling individuals who possess the desire to murder unlike them. Who from that instant on must consistently recall that existence and demise aren't determined by one's rank in martial arts, so they don't conclude with a disastrous fate like numerous novices who overlook the truths. Smiling, the protagonist states now it's time to consume. Grinning, the protagonist states now it's time to sip. Jinga inquires if that wasn't also his initial occurrence. Lying, our lad replies it was. And in that situation everyone should lift a glass for finishing their first incident in Zhang's securely. For finishing their initial incident in Zhang's securely. Hua states the beverage is delightful, and the long-haired lad concurs. The girl then remarks now she comprehends why Wei enjoys consuming alcohol so much. Without uttering a word, she will contemplate the blade method the main character employed previously, which certainly wasn't from Manhwa. Meaning he needs to discover where it's from. Out loud, the boy states he has an inquiry for Hua about the method he employed during the conflict with the Crimson Wolf sword, since his sword changed into something he'd never encountered before. He'd never observed prior. It had focused strength and shapes that weren't sleek. Believing, our lad states he assumed everyone would be concentrated on the other foes instead of watching him employing the sword method that encompasses the concept of mass, which is one of the concepts he created in his previous life. With his mind whirling, he attempts to comprehend how the boy observed such a delicate shift in motion, stating aloud that he'll clarify further about it, but not at that instant because there's something they must accomplish after they complete drinking, of course. Since after they listen to what he has to express, they won't have time to drink for the next 3 days. Elsewhere, we observe a carriage in the woods. Suddenly someone commands the driver to halt the vehicle at once. To halt the automobile instantly. The man inquires what's happening. Emerging from the shrubs, that elderly man states it's nothing critical, but the man must surrender all he possesses if he wishes to remain alive. If he desires to remain alive, we notice that a little further away the Golden Quartet is watching the whole situation. Scenario. Hua then states the bandits conceal themselves in the woods until someone strolls by, and even if they appear to be part of the underworld, they're distinct because they've mastered martial arts and are more structured, since the earlier offenders only learned martial arts. Since the earlier offenders only mastered martial arts because the Red Wolf sword had an objective to achieve, but these individuals are organized, and if they're heterids because there's a stronghold nearby. Hua states she comprehends and inquires why Hui is sharing all this. Our boy then replies it's because for the next 3 days they will eliminate every stronghold that exists. And each one will have the opportunity to dismantle one of the edifices alone while the others observe. The trio is rather astonished. Concerned, the girl inquires why he made that choice, and if it was because they did something incorrect. The protagonist questions what she implies, because they realize they nearly perished due to being unable to eliminate the underworld characters. Because of being incapable of eliminating the underworld individuals, primarily since they weren't prepared to injure other people, which they'll need to do on this task. She all concurs and states that indeed they could have perished if it weren't for Hui. Jin then inquires how the protagonist readied himself to slay others. readying himself to eliminate others, and his reflections are boy contemplates how he desires to discuss his initial genuine battle. About his initial genuine battle which occurred a long while back, but it's still something you don't readily overlook. But it's still something you don't readily forget because he was youthful and frightened, worried that if he didn't slay he would perish. Snapping out of it, he states he was scared they'd get harmed, so he eliminated the foe to avert their anxieties. So he eliminated the foe to stop their anxieties from turning into truth. Jean chooses not to express anything further after listening to that, the main character then states. After listening to that, the main character then remarks everyone must possess their own motives to battle. He then declares that he'll instruct the sword method to chill based on how he manages the fortress. To relax depending on how he manages the fortress, and since this is the initial night he'll demonstrate how it's done himself. After a few moments we observe the bandit with his face pushing a hole in the earth. With his face pushing a hole in the earth fills him up and takes the opportunity to hit him a few more times to rouse the man up and make him reveal the path. To rouse the man and compel him to reveal the path, so that after a while he swiftly arrives at the stronghold. Thus after a while he swiftly arrives at the stronghold. The outlaws are astonished when they witness the spectacle, but abruptly we observe everyone on the floor insensible. But abruptly we observe everyone on the ground insensible, while we brushes off his garments, indicating the commencement of 3 days of unique training, where in the morning they observe. Where in the morning they oversee the savage blood faction, and at night they manage the fortresses. And at night they manage with the strongholds. We discover the training was successful even though initially the followers hesitated. Even though initially the disciples wavered, but after a few battles they appeared to grasp something because they ceased hesitating swiftly. Because they ceased wavering swiftly and performed excellently, managing the fortifications, with Mu Jin being the sole one who appeared to require additional time. Contemplating our boy, states the young man. Considering our lad, states the young man, is far superior to the other two but still hesitates to eliminate even when being assaulted. Even when being assaulted, which signifies he's more fearful of harming others than of perishing, something the protagonist can't alter. Something the main character can't alter, since the boy must conquer that independently. After merely 2 days we discover the quartet finished all the strongholds. The protagonist commends everyone for the excellent effort. The main character commends everyone for the excellent effort and declares they'll now proceed to wine, and is scheduled. Hua inquires why they can't go that evening. Hua inquires why they cannot go that evening, and Wei replies it's because he assured Kill he would instruct the method. He instructs the method, then asserts that anyone can remain too if they wish to learn without doubt. The protagonist starts the exhibition while his pupils observe without blinking. While his pupils observe without blinking, since they're too astonished to even do that, the main character then states that as the lad observed, the method is Mount Who's sixth combination. The method is Mount Who's sixth combination, which he altered by incorporating more mass. He'll inquire what he signifies by mass, clarifying our lad states Mount Who's sword methods permit an individual to transition to the subsequent strike even when obstructed. Even when obstructed, which signifies it can be merged with any other method, and also enables the incorporation of aspects of deception. To blend in aspects of deception, the follower stays astonished. Wei states they all ought to already be aware. Wei states they all ought to already be aware of the sword saying of Mount Hua. Even if the individual wasn't the initial to do this, he was the finest, which implies he also possessed profound martial wisdom to the extent that perhaps the ostentatious change. To the extent that perhaps the extravagant change and the purple flower were mixtures of the sixth blade, which vary according to the level of pressure exerted. Which vary depending on the quantity of weight exerted. That's why Mount Whose methods are unfinished. They don't examine the sword's weight thoroughly enough, and acquiring a new technique that was never completed when one already possesses a strong foundation can be unwise. When one already possesses a sturdy base can be unwise. Something can attract a new and honed in private, since an unfinished method could ultimately lead to disorder. After all this lovely clarification, Wei inquires Kuel if that was the method he wished to master. If that was the method he wished to master. After a few moments in quiet, the boy raises his head and replies yes, then requests him to instruct him. We discover that Kuel's education persisted throughout the whole night until sunrise. Fatigued, Hua ponders how much longer she'll need to remain vigilant. How much longer she'll need to maintain vigilance, then draws Jin's notice to propose they escape from their concentrate on the practice. Wei states the lad has been handling the sword, employing the concept of deception. Utilizing the concept of deception instead of concentrating on the concept of mass and the distinction in how to wield the sword. Sweating, Kuel states, He comprehends. In the backdrop we observe the two who were on guard have already departed, opting to go inspect the underworld individuals and obtain some repose. And obtain some relaxation or head into the city where an annoyed man instructs another to move quicker. Because at that speed they won't be able to achieve anything. Looking around, Hua observes there are no issues to address. There are no issues to manage, concluding that, in fact, the underworld individuals just required an opportunity to transform their lives. However, she then considers maybe they're only acting because they realize they're being observed by her and by Mu Jin, who is elsewhere. Even so, the girl chooses to cease worrying and get some sleep since she toiled hard these past few days. Since she toiled diligently these previous few days, suddenly someone grabs her focus. Startled, she assumes a fighting stance while unsheathing her sword, but to her utter astonishment she encounters face to face with the woman who was harmed in the Savage Blood faction's structure. The one expresses regret for frightening her, firmly grasping the hand of a small girl. Securely grasping the hand of a small girl, then she requested her younger sibling Yum Yum to greet. Embarrassed, what inquired how the lady is faring. Without responding, the lady appreciates her for rescuing her brother, bringing tears to the followers' eyes. The lady then states her injuries mend swiftly, and that thanks to the young girl they were able to conduct her father's memorial. Drying her eyes, the girl asks what she signifies by father. The girl inquires what she signifies by father, narrating shortly, the man who was deceased. When she reached, Hua expresses regret for not getting there in time and states she wishes he rests in tranquility. And states she wishes he finds tranquility. The woman expresses she doesn't require an apology, because they're genuinely thankful. Suddenly Yum Yum begins stuttering something with her adorable little voice. Then states that one day she'll become a remarkable knight. Hearing that shatters Hua's heart, and she can't restrain the tears. Not comprehending, the woman inquires why the young lady is weeping, but the disciple replies that undoubtedly the little girl will grow into a very powerful fighter, even mightier than her. The woman asks if Hua is experiencing any discomfort. The lady inquires if Hua is experiencing any discomfort since she's weeping, but she replies that's not the case. The day swiftly goes by, yielding to nights. The day swiftly elapses, yielding to nights. Somewhere inside, Mujin doesn't appear to be faring very well. Judging by the look on his face. We transition to the following day where Hua, perspiring, toasts her head beneath the sun, exclaiming. She inquires why we are strolling so quickly. Yelling, she inquires why we are moving so quickly. Our boy states that in fact she's the one who needs to unwind after taking a break for a day. After relaxing for a day, which means she didn't exercise adequately. The girl merely states they ought to have departed sooner instead of resting like he commanded. Instead of relaxing like he commanded. After receiving a piercing glance, the follower understands she spoke too much. Excessively, raking the strange gesture Jean mentions. He was astonished to observe that the underworld individuals in Posen are thriving. Enraged, the main character states. Angry, the main character states what they truly need to be concerned about is that fragile mentality they possess, indicating that Jin's tactic to divert the topic has not succeeded. Abruptly, Hua mentions she longs for Yum Yum, who is the younger sibling of a girl she rescued during the Savage Blood assault. Thrilled, Hua states the little one expressed she desires to become an incredible knight warrior like her when she matures. Ridiculing, our lad states it's the initial occasion he's ever concerned about a child's destiny. He's always concerned about a child's future, and when the girl attempts to respond, he instructs her to be quiet because they have finally reached Huainan. Fortunately, before dusk. Jean then mentions there's an outside faction of Mount Hua in the city known as the Fresh Flower Sect. The New Blossom Group. Hua states that in that situation they ought to proceed there for dinner. Swiftly, the quartet reaches the sect's headquarters and encounters a bunch of boys. A group of lads assaulting ruthlessly another gray-haired boy. Striking ruthlessly on another gray-haired boy, one of the boys hits the one being restrained right in the abdomen, but as he lifts his arm to deliver the next hit, he's halted by someone's hand. Another's hand seizing the boy's wrist. Hua states that a small child is striking someone utilizing a great deal of internal energy. The boy glances to the side and discovers there's more than one grown-up present. The boy who is being struck swiftly understands that gang is part of the original Mount Hua sect. That faction is part of the original Mount Hua sect. Our lad persists and states that such a strike could be sufficient to slay a youngster who hasn't mastered martial arts, and casting a grim gaze. And throwing a grim glance, he declares that the lad must be conscious of that to be striking like that. To be striking like that, she must be confident of it, since she's assaulting with her own hands. The girl gets annoyed by that remark to him, even at a tender age. To him, even at a tender age, that boy appears haughty, and perhaps yes, his parents are to blame. That's why he's not accountable for his behavior, since he was swayed from the outside. She continues gazing at him with resolve. The protagonist is struck by that the manner the girl gazes at him is perilous. Many individuals perpetrate offenses because of that. He states the girl appears to be part of an unconventional group, and her cult may have swayed her to behave that way. A little boy calls out on his path to get his attention, and Mu Hui observes her inquisitively. At that instant, the white-haired boy is on the verge of speaking. The protagonist listens intently but receives no reply. He merely instructs them both to depart. Before he concludes up injuring them. The scene is strained with everyone still in the center of the woods. Then the young boy creates a hand gesture. He presents himself as Lim Sanha from the Fresh Blossom sect, from the New Blossom group, and appreciates them for the assistance. The man then states his name is Mu Hui, his student of the Mount Hua group. Concerned, his partner inquires if Lim Sanha is fine. His associate inquires if Lim Sanha is fine. He affirms and states one of the children was the youthful chief of the Great Truth sect. Faction Gisan, and the others were merely attempting to master martial arts. They were annoying him because his faction has never had favorable relations with the sect of truth. They discovered his faction was weaker, so they began teasing him. The young girl inquires of the boy if the chief is aware of those occurrences. Lim Sanha verifies and states that in the past he used to retaliate and protect himself. After that, the head of the Fresh Flower sect went to the Great Truth sect. Visited the Magnificent Truth sect. In the recollections, we observe the chief of the sect of truth state their offspring wouldn't act in such a manner without a motive. Without a cause, they accused him and transformed it into a full-scale dispute. However, they didn't desire any further combat, so the chief of the Fresh Flower sect retreated. If that war rekindles, everything will fall apart, and Mu Hui states he comprehends his motives. He states he now realizes why the boy permits those children to torment him. Meanwhile, the young girl considers it absurd that the external sect of Mount Hua is being treated in such a manner, but to the protagonist everything occurs for a purpose, and they ought to heed the leader. The chief at the spiritual location. All the participants notice the followers' entrance astonished. Impressed, the group enters the location with resolve. Mu Hui observes they all have white cherry blossoms stitched on their attire. The members anticipate their presentation. The group forms the emblem of their faction and conveys appreciation for the chance to be present. The leader presents himself as Lim Magak. He states everyone has listened to the tale about them. Conquering the dragon faction in a single evening, but the protagonist believes that's an overstatement. Lim Magak understands it was his son. Who led them there and appreciates him for the excellent effort. He then invites the group indoors. Beckons the group indoors. They are guided to the primary hall. Within, they take a seat at a table. Everyone praises the coffee there. But Lim Magak stays humble. Reflectively, the leader affectionately recalls Mount Hua. Considerately, the chief affectionately recalls Mount Hua. The main character states that even though they're weary, they must address a problem, then inquires how the Fresh Flower sect is faring. What the chief states there, in a challenging situation, they never encountered issues in the past since they were consistently equal in power. However, circumstances alter after the Shangxi assault. Matters shift following the Shangxi assault. The Great True sect grew more confrontational and now meddles with their faction, inciting them. Even his offspring is enduring the repercussions of that. He would cherish to retaliate for his son, but that's precisely what they desire. They're attempting to control them at any expense. Since he lacks the strength to protect them. He feels like he's fallen short as both a leader and a parent. Everyone questions why he didn't seek assistance from the Mount Hua sect. The chief states that in spite of everything. Despite all, he's grateful they're present. He claims just their existence is sufficient to deter his foes, but the team perceives that the man doesn't have faith in them. The main character inquires about the cause of that look he had toward his offspring. His allies don't comprehend what he implies. The chief mentions he's observing things that aren't present because he relies on the team. After all, there's no justification for a simple chief of an outside faction not to have confidence in them. Not to rely on them. He states it's now time for supper. and they should prepare. Recognizing the leader doesn't wish to accept their assistance, the fighter comprehends his stance. Evidently, he anticipated more from such a formidable sect. He deemed them too inexperienced and must have chosen to retain them there for the time being and reject them later. For the time being and disregard them afterward, but he reflects on his son and all the other individuals who've had to withstand so much unease. In his recollections, the man states he feels sorry for them. In his recollections, the man states he feels sorry for them. It appears that at that instant he was the one behaving like a child. He recalls how perceptive the protagonist is, and still during a gathering the warrior declares they will handle dinner themselves. His associate finds that demeanor rather impolite. His associate deems that demeanor rather impolite. The chief then inquires why they dismiss his kindness. The main character contends that he can't require anything from them since they didn't assist earlier. The individual is rather astonished by that. The young woman. The man is rather astonished by that. The girl ponders what she just listened to. She remembers when the protagonist chose to save her life. In a recollection, when his allies doubted his techniques, he stated that laying a trap was their manner of responding in the current moment. In the current moment, the young lady perceives that man is distinct from the one she encountered. She ponders what is occurring to him in the woods. In the woods, the girl states her elder is behaving very odd. Something must have occurred. Something must have occurred, and she wants to understand what everyone in the group anticipates for some sort of clarification. Then the protagonist chooses to inform him. Then the main character chooses to inform him. His partner doesn't comprehend the circumstance. The fighter states it's all quite odd and queries the behavior of the sex children towards them. And inquiries the demeanor of the sex children toward them. One of those youngsters is a heir, so he's not that pure, but there must be a motive. Why would the sect of truth retreat? Because of them. Why would the sect of truth retreat? Because of them doesn't make sense. There are only 4 of them, so the odds of losing are high. In that case, everyone would say the Mount Hua sect faltered, and that would be the worst possible result. But issues are only issues if they fail. But issues are only issues if they do not succeed. They need to address the circumstance, and the leader certainly has a strategy in mind. 2 men are seated at a table dining. 2 guys are seated at a table consuming that ought to be fresh flower domain, but they're dining as if it's their eating area. You can observe their eyes. They're filled with grievances and searching for targets. A woman collides with the men, attracting their focus. A lady collides with the men, attracting their notice. She offers them a grin and sheepishly apologizes. And shamefully apologizes. Their appearance is sheer loathing, as if they're on the verge of doing something dreadful. She also remarked something about taxes. She also stated something about taxes, which makes the group even more perplexed. The group of men remarks on the protagonist's faction, labeling them opportunists. Evidently, the great faction of truth has already seized that location. The group continues discussing some events about to occur. The protagonist commands that none of his associates intervene. The main character commands that none of his associates intervene regardless of what occurs. Regardless of what occurs, they consider that demand odd. Another individual walks past them stating he can't endure it any longer. And then nudges another guy on the shoulder. He inquired if they intended to express those things merely to be listened to. The ambience starts to become strained. Then the opposing group starts to taunt them. And the sex group displays no apprehension. The man states he's consuming too much and commands him to cease at once, but the man persists. Stating they're tearing around haughtily. He labels them a group of cursed demonic scoundrels, keeps taunting him, but the man abruptly yanks his chair forcefully. Causing him to tumble to the floor, then warns him, stating that's what occurs when someone offends the sect of truth. When an individual disparages the sect of truth, that's when the sect's chief chooses to intervene. This captures the focus of the man who was assaulting, not just his focus, but that of everyone nearby. One of them ponders who that individual is. But before he can even comprehend, the young fighter responds swiftly and delivers a powerful kick to him. And provides a powerful blow to him. He doesn't merely assault that man, but everyone nearby him. The man inquires what's happening. He abruptly can't shift anymore. That's precisely what the chief desires to understand, but the fighter only wants to comprehend how someone with not even a hint of combat ability dares to handle a blade, especially since he always believed. Particularly since he consistently believed there were distinctions between conventional and unconventional partnerships. He inquires what the individual was intending to do with that blade. He inquires what the man was intending to do with that sword. Embarrassed, the opponent replies he merely utilized it to frighten him. The chief then takes the sword from him, stating that if he was going to wield it to threaten a feeble individual, it's preferable he doesn't possess it at all, and advises him to resolve matters with the same person he harmed. With the same fellow he injured, the man finds it ridiculous that he's attempting to initiate a brawl, so the fighter becomes furious, stating that man must believe his sect is a prank. The man expresses regret but cautions that he is asking for it. The fighter declares the only manner he'll be pardoned. The fighter states the sole method he'll be pardoned is by pleading for absolution at the New Blossom sect, and if he's not present before dusk. And if he's not present before dusk, the sect of truth will turn into nothing more than a recollection. The faction of truth will turn into nothing more than a recollection. Terrified, the man merely nods. Everyone on his squad goes quiet at that. It appears their chief is growing bolder with each passing day. With each advancing day, they ponder if matters will ever genuinely be fine. The following day, the chief of the faction of truth. The following day, the chief of the sect of truth is strolling through the woods. He's accompanied by his group. They all stand before a magnificent temple. 3 times in his life, the sect chief experienced such profound sorrow in his chest. The first was when the members of the Manhwa sect. The initial was when the members of the Manhwa sect were perishing in a gruesome conflict. The second was when his oldest son passed away. The second was when his oldest child passed away, and the last was when he understood his child had been enduring episodes. His child had been enduring assaults. Now another instance has been included in that catalog. At the temple, the main character observes that his opponent still has no desire to apologize. The elderly man states that even though he mastered martial arts, he studied martial arts, he understands nothing about appropriate manners. At that, the young man infers his behavior must have troubled him significantly. Perhaps he lacks decorum. But that doesn't even equate to what the great sect of truth is doing, labeling it more of a cult. Referring to it more as a sect, he instructs them to enter and converse. After all, someone could witness the situation and misinterpret, and no one gains from fostering misinterpretations. And no one gains from generating misconceptions. The elderly man observes that the lad enjoys conversing, so perhaps he's merely stalling. The fighter would prefer to strike in that moment and place. The fighter would prefer to strike in that moment, but it's wiser to remain composed for the time being. But it's preferable to remain composed for now. Understanding everything is proceeding according to Mui's strategy, the leader welcomes them in. In previous recollections, we observe the leader interrogating Master Mu. Regarding the necessity for discord. About the necessity for disagreement, the young man requests him to relax so he can clarify. He states he understands they're experiencing difficulty trusting his group. Relying on his group, but their chief relied on their assessment and deeds. He requested them to examine the areas of Pozung. Weinen and Lucian simultaneously. The fierce dragon faction and Pozung was linked to martial artists, so confrontation there was inevitable. So dispute there was inescapable. The chief doesn't comprehend how just 4 of them succeeded in overcoming such a fighter without harm. But the young man clarifies it wasn't for it was him solely. That's why he requires this group to have faith in his team. He's even prepared to agree to a contest if that's what they desire. The leader then inquires if they could battle the whole sect of truth, but the young man comforts him. There's no need to fret, he can manage it all by himself. In the current moment, everyone is positioned at a table. Now that the faction of truth is present, everything seems altered. Mui states he's keen on resolving matters once and for all, so he introduces his suggestion, selecting 1 member from each faction for a duel. Selecting 1 individual from each faction for a combat. Everyone is astonished by the notion. The elderly man starts to chuckle. He understands the boy didn't inform Lin Mag of the complete scheme. He's amazed by that sort of suggestion. He even inquires if the man is involved in the demise of his son. He states that boy he relied on so much ultimately betrayed him. Lin Mag's son perished in a duel against the sect of truth. Mui expresses regret for that, but the leader claims it's not his responsibility. But the chief states it's not his responsibility. He requests the young man to proceed, and the lad strengthens his suggestion. The contest will involve 3 individuals from each faction: the chief, the deputy chief, and the most powerful individual from each group. They then arrange the duel for 5 days from now. But the elderly man is worried about the repercussions if they fail again. The youth tells him not to fret since their standing isn't exactly impressive at the moment. The opponent cautions him to be cautious with his words, stating the only reason they haven't struck yet is because they were intrigued by the suggestion. The main character says he was simply making a remark. Another member of the opposing faction inquires if he believes they're feeble. He replies they're restraining themselves. He states they're restraining, which causes the protagonist to regard them with a defiant stare. Then the elderly man rises and mentions they'll come back in 5 days. Then the elderly man rises and states they'll come back in 5 days. He also mentions he wishes it will be a just duel, and that no one perishes. The chief is deep in contemplation regarding it. The head of that faction has likely grown more powerful than him over time. The chief of that group has likely grown more powerful than him over time. He informs the protagonist they'll look for someone skilled to battle him. The young man merely acknowledges, although he has faith in him. The chief inquires if everything is genuinely fine. Although he relies on him, the leader inquires if everything is genuinely fine. He's going to place all his confidence in the young man. Now they proceed to the training hall. The protagonist remarks that he should envision himself as a deceased person over the next few days. The main character remarks that he ought to envision himself as a deceased individual over the upcoming days during practice. Everyone startled. The girl inquires if senior brother is fine, but no one truly understands. He's practicing like mad, putting in all his effort. A member of the squad is doing their utmost to assist him. A participant of the group is doing their utmost to assist him. That individual is exceptional, and without a doubt, that's a beast. The captain persists in his practice all day long. The lad aiding him has his blade in hand. The lad assisting him has his blade in hand. If the chief lowers himself any further, he'll get injured. He requests him to hold on just a little longer. Because the training is nearly finished. Meanwhile, the leader's offspring is deep in contemplation. Even if Mukwi assists him, he won't become that powerful in such a brief period. Unexpectedly, something grabs his focus. The protagonist stands before the boy and states the kid is correct about that. It truly isn't feasible to get powerful in such a brief period. However, everything alters when it comes to acquiring experience, so he chooses to inquire Lim Santa something he wishes to know if he's utilizing his martial arts properly, and the boy affirms. Then he requests the boy to mimic him. Lim Santa doesn't entirely comprehend with that. The protagonist employs his strength against the trunk of a tree. With that, the hero utilizes his power against the base of a tree. A small child is amazed by the exhibition. The man states the boy possesses sufficient inner energy to perform that kind of action. The man states the boy possesses sufficient internal energy to accomplish that kind of task. Now he wishes to witness it with his own eyes. If he triumphs, wonderful. If not, he'll continue attempting until he does. Time elapses until the day starts to come to an end. The protagonist is proud of the lad for putting in his utmost. The main character is proud of the boy for putting in his all. Now they'll practice again the following day, but Lim Sanhain is fatigued, lying on the ground with aching hands. Reclining on the earth with aching hands. It concludes that this man truly is a fiend. You won't even receive any respite as the day is already starting to dawn. Now it's the second day of training, and they're going to practice together. Yesterday, father and son discovered how to utilize their bodies. Yesterday, dad and son discovered how to utilize their physiques. The leader's physique enhanced significantly from the practice and recuperated swiftly. Yesterday's practice was crucial for today's. Now they will discover how to locate their positions, and Move Wei will demonstrate to them how. Now they will discover how to identify their viewpoints, and Move Wei will demonstrate to them how. He requests his aides to assume their roles. He requests his aides to assume their places. Move Wei is about to battle all of them. The girl will be the initial one. She rushes at him with all her strength. She lunges at him with all she's got, but the boy effortlessly evades her blade and swiftly delivers a kick to the young woman, who tumbles forcefully backward. Then the second aide intervenes, but the fighter persists in defending and retaliating. He's remarkably quick and nimble. He's extremely quick and nimble, though it appears risky. Lim Sanhain's father chooses to merely observe for the time being. Although it appears perilous, Lim Sanhain's father chooses to merely observe for the moment. He ponders what Move Wei is attempting to reveal to them in the battle. The main character overcomes the girl, then evades and returns to battling the second aide. Then evades and returns to battling the second assistant. The boy's blade has more heft now, but it's still insufficient. He keeps sparring with his companion. He persists training with his companion, but ultimately that one also fails. In the conclusion, he informs his teammates where they erred. In the conclusion, he informs his companions where they erred and what they must enhance. That's how both will practice until the confrontation, but the captain doesn't fully comprehend. To him, it all appeared too chaotic for a mere training session. To him it all appeared too extreme for a basic training session, but he observed something unique. The warrior states that the finest method to enhance in a brief period is to acquire more life and death encounters. That's the sole method they'll be capable of protecting themselves from even feeble adversaries. Now this will be a genuine battle, and their objective will be to eliminate him. Lim Sanhain has been observing closely, and his father displays worry for him. But the boy is resolute to give his utmost in the battle. If he's going to undertake it, then it must be executed properly. So he rushes at Mu Wai, but the boy is capable of responding effortlessly. Lim Sanhain is propelled backward. As his father observes the spectacle, and before he comprehends it, Mu Wai's blade sweeps alarmingly near to his visage. Mu Wai's blade travels alarmingly near to his face. The battle is intense, and the chief leaps back. He inquires, it merely appears fine. The lad states it pained to be struck. But it was no major issue behind them. The fighter inquires, if they're intending to merely remain there conversing, they ought to combat like it's a genuine conflict. They must contend as if it's a genuine conflict. He and the lad won't endure if they don't. The chief comes back to the struggle. The chief returns to the battle with his blade and power. He gives it all he's got, but the fighter Mu Wai still manages to strike him with ease. Then he delivers a powerful blow to the man's face. According to him, in that fight alone, the leader has already perished 314 times. The man understands he can sense his adversary's actions even with his eyes shut. Utilizing that kind of skill shouldn't be difficult for him. Yet nonetheless we can't evade correctly. The leader contends that it's due to the boy's strikes being simply too swift. He didn't even employ his inner energy at that instant. He didn't even utilize his inner strength at that moment, though it appeared like it. The fighter merely requests him not to attempt to transfer his duties onto another person. Then they resume battling once more. The chief becomes increasingly resolute. He rushes headlong toward Mu Wai. He attacks with full strength toward Mu Wai, but that also turns out ineffective. That also demonstrates futile until the day shifts to twilight and the man reclines on the earth completely drained. Fatigued, but Mu Wai displays no compassion and urges him to battle once more. This time, however, it is the young lad who moves towards him. The man progresses too. The individual progresses too, but once again the main character conquers him, and so they persist in training them, halting throughout the night without interruption. The following day, two men are positioned at a table sipping tea. One of them states that a ascending lotus blade should be sufficient for the conflict. The chief of that faction intends to disgrace them all on the day of the contest. The individual in front of him will assume the part of humiliating them, will perform the part of degrading them. According to the peculiar man, it would be a wonder if he doesn't conclude up immobilized. He also concerns himself with the repercussions following a demise. But the leader comforts him. Whispers are merely whispers. Even if solely Manhwa opposes them, it won't be an issue. The leader states he understands how to manage it independently. The man before him ponders how someone less powerful than him can be so conceited. He wonders whether the man is blinded by avarice or has consistently been that way. Everyone obeyed the command and exited the conference room, but nothing distracts Mu Wei's thoughts from the sense that he is on the verge of discovering what Kong is concealing. The young man stays contemplative as he recognizes there is something more crucial. The training of his team must continue as scheduled. The instruction of his team must continue as scheduled, so everyone is in place in the courtyard, prepared to start. He admits to Mu Hua that he feels guilty for not having overseen for training recently. Now he plans to instruct them like canines. Mu Kai U is so keen to unveil his sword that he strikes without considering, hurling the blade at his companion and mentor. Throwing the weapon at his companion and mentor, the enormous sword slices through the air rapidly toward Mu Wei, but he responds promptly and deflects the strike. The young man understands, just as he anticipated, that the hefty sword has made his actions more powerful and weighty. That the massive sword has made his strikes more powerful and weighty, but with one swift motion, he traps the warrior and positions his blade directly at his throat. He traps the fighter and positions his sword directly at his throat, clarifying that the tool's heft has also rendered him slower, and that his one error could cost him his existence. As he speaks, Mu would notice something in his peripheral sight. He then evades Mu Wei's strike. He then evades Mu Wei's strike, recognizing that he had indeed sidestepped his sheath. This is a diversion strategy that compels the adversary to squander their reflex on an item that can't inflict damage, only to proceed with a genuine assault, a maneuver that disrupts the rival while the blade comes from the contrary direction, still refraining from the use of her sword. Still evading the use of her blade, she strikes the master's leg and preserves her upper hand, gradually diminishing him, and sustains her edge, gradually diminishing him. Astonished by his protection, the young lady attempts to comprehend what went awry. Mu Wei clarifies that although smart doesn't function so effectively because it's too apparent a ruse, something an adept combatant would notice. Something an adept combatant would notice as he hits her without compassion. In a quick motion, she flees and rushes away like a shadow. She flees and rushes away like a streak. Her perceptions are keen, and she observes Mu Wei come near from a distance like a fiend. From a distance like a fiend, acknowledging her innate skill, he believes he can assist her in better utilizing that benefit. Taking space, she composes herself, still agitated. Taking space, she collects herself, still agitated. Mu Wei shouts in fury that she nearly perished and hardly completes her grievance when the master emerges behind her, blade against her throat, stressing that if she wishes to confront her foes, she genuinely needs to relax. The girl confesses that would require years, and they proceed to the next lesson. Mu Jin steps forward to confront the challenge. Though very youthful, he succeeds in managing his temper and behave. However, the senior disciple observes that even though he's superior in matches, the boy has a vulnerability. The lad has a vulnerability. Mu Wei initiates a flanking assault. The boy sidesteps with all his strength and adjusts himself for a quick retaliation. He hits, sending his blade toward the master without reluctance, but Mu Wei dodges effortlessly and observes the boy isn't as quick as he ought to be. Even so, the young person doesn't surrender and attempts to strike from behind as the senior student turns his back. As the senior apprentice turns his back, however, as staff softly strikes his back and he realizes it's not the sword. Outraged, he insists to know why the boy isn't utilizing all his capabilities. He insists to understand why the boy is utilizing all his skills and is more concerned about his welfare than assaulting, while firmly grasping the combat staff with one hand. Securely holding the combat staff with one hand, Mu Wei employs the other to hit Ju Min with a forceful strike directly to the chest, inflicting such severe pain that he loses his breath. Causing such severe agony that he loses his breath and nearly vomits. His companions observe nervously because they understand how much that must have pained. Ju Min collapses to the ground from the force of the strike, and Mu Wei determines that he is more terrified of harming others than of perishing. Of injuring others than of perishing, and that is his flaw. The young man rides in agony while his mentor contemplates that this might not be an issue now, but it will be when he confronts a genuine adversary. When Ju Min must exert his utmost for himself and for others. He won't be able to perform if he succumbs to his feelings, and that will endanger everyone. And that will place everyone at hazard. Worried about the circumstance, they all understand that if matters persist like this, he might have to request the young man to exit the group. After they complete the day's training, and Mu Wei stresses that they are all conscious of their own shortcomings. There is no quick fix to enhancing overnight. The quickest route is to practice without ceasing. He finishes by stating that if they comprehend that, if they realize that they ought to train as if there's no future, because the sole method to conquer an issue is by confronting it. Ju Min pays attention and contemplates, but stays on the ground, feeling like a disappointment. At that instant, night descends in Lushan. The moonlight mirrors on the faint shimmer of the blade. Mu Wei perspires as he practices his physique and strength conditioning. Someone startles him by inquiring if he's chosen to train late into the night. That individual is the chief, Kong Bo Young. The man confesses to being astonished. Since many individuals overlook strength training, and states Mu Wei brings to mind the Iron Mountain Fist King. They confront one another in the courtyard, and the young man mentions he can depart if the leader desires the area for his own practice. If the chief desires the area for his own practice, after all, what is he doing there if not to practice? Getting straight to the matter, the man states he truly requires a favor. And courteously requests the senior disciple to end his life right away. With an indifferent and unshocked demeanor, the young man gazes at him. The youthful man gazes at him without reluctance. He lifts his sword toward the man and states eliminating him won't be an issue, but Kong requests him to pause. But Kong requests him to pause. Mu Wei doesn't comprehend since he was just about to satisfy the man's demand, who appears astonished that he didn't even inquire for an explanation, but that makes things more thrilling. But that renders things more thrilling since what he truly wishes to suggest is a duel. Quietly the young man consents without dissent. Tranquilly the young man consents without dissent and considers that perhaps now he'll be able to uncover what the man is concealing. However, the leader establishes a stipulation: you must battle, as if he plans to slay. Reflecting on this, Mu Wei appears to make a revelation. He notices the leader's hand and sword with care. Kong concludes his reasoning by stating there's no purpose in training, it's not genuine, and that he too will combat, as if he plans to slay the disciple. The clash commences with Kong moving at rapid speed. The conflict commences with Kong advancing at rapid velocity. With a tremendous jump, he soars towards Mu Wei, utilizing all his accurate strategies. Utilizing all his exact strategies, his blade glides through the atmosphere as the young man defends. Instead of attacking right away, he holds the handle with both hands. He clutches the handle with both hands and kneels down to evade the second strike, which barely brushes his hair. He then stands and wields his metal sword, aiming straight at the leader. Targeting straight at the chief, his actions are frigid and rapid. Their arms collide mid-air as they obstruct each other's blows. Mu Wei tightens his fists and builds energy. Mu Wei tightens his fists and builds force, hitting Kong forcefully in the solar plexus. Breathless, he wheezes and drools as he experiences the impact. But the boy displays no worry and lifts his other arm with the sword, readying another attack. Preparing another assault, Kong is nearly struck directly by the blade but evades to the side, reclaiming position. He strikes out at the boy, who deflects the attack by swinging his sword behind him without even glancing. The tempo of the battle remains fierce between them. The speed of the battle stays fierce between them. They both take a short distance and gaze at each other. Kong doesn't retreat and tries another rush again from the side. Mu Wei moves swiftly ahead as Kong opens his defense. As Kong releases his guard, he permits his adversary to advance unprotected and is hit in the face. Even as he fails, he is amazed by the young man's cleverness. Recognizing that the apprentice utilized all his awareness and planned the move flawlessly, halting the battle, the leader inquires how he detected the pattern. Mu Wei clarifies that he understood Kong exerts a lot of force into his blows but hardly employs thrusting techniques. He also found out that Kong was concealing the truth that he's not accustomed to fighting with his left hand, and exploited that weakness and seized the opportunity of that opening. The leader concurs with the remark and confesses he's still mastering to combat with the sole limb he has remaining. To the disciple, the alterations appear instinctive. He recognizes that it continues to be an admirable accomplishment how the leader is surmounting his challenges. How the chief is surmounting his challenges. Examining the methods as a whole, he merely indicates that the excessive strength and the sword disrupt the equilibrium of the actions. The young man recommends that to amend this. The youthful individual suggests that to amend this, the chief should concentrate more on honing accuracy and penetrating methods. Kong now appears to grasp more clearly what he must do. As they converse, Mu Wei also discloses that he observed the leader didn't wish to demonstrate all that he was capable of. Didn't wish to reveal to him all he was capable of. Astonished, the man acknowledges that's accurate, but that the boy also didn't utilize even half of his energy. Clearly, he concedes that if he had employed all his might. Clearly, he acknowledges that if he had utilized all his power, Kong would have been severely harmed. The leader agrees it was preferable that way. They keep conversing as the day dawns and the initial beams of sunlight illuminate the field. Weary, Kong appreciates the disciple and proceeds to his quarters. As he strolls, Mu Wei contemplates that assessing his combat abilities wasn't the sole purpose behind that duel. His true aim was to gauge something in the end. He genuinely wanted to challenge the young man and see if he would be capable of confronting the assassin. Even so, if the Zongan sect is managing it, there's no reason to be so apprehensive. Pondering, the young man concludes that this can only imply Kong knows who the assassin is and comprehends his strength entirely, and he likely encountered him a long time ago. The ancient monster with many faces. Mu Wei remembers that this lunatic was the one. This insane individual was the one who sparked the myth of the demon assassin. Adept in concealment, few individuals ever witnessed his genuine visage. Glimpsed his genuine visage. He used to eliminate heads of minor factions and assume their roles and personas. Infiltrating the clans. He would also ignite violent disputes among them. Beyond instigating strife, the creature obliterated Beyond planting discord, the beast obliterated the lives of those nearby him, inflicting pain merely for entertainment. Revisiting his recollections, the follower remembers the instant he confronted the beast when he had masked himself as Hyunjo. Even though he succeeded in wounding him, it wasn't sufficient. The beast fled and stayed concealed for an extended period. There are whispers that he has reappeared, but there are also uncertainties since the recent murder appeared distinct. The follower continues staring at the skyline, lost in contemplation. Whether it's merely an assassin or genuinely the fiend remains an enigma. Or genuinely the demon stays an enigma. What's certain is that the chief of the Radiant Light sect appears to know something significant that he opted not to disclose. Otherwise, he wouldn't be this uneasy attempting to link the deities. Mu Wei thinks it would be unfeasible for the creature to have survived this long, so it's probable the assassin is one of his followers. Even more enigmatic than the identity of this individual is the scope of his strength. Restless, the young man perceives that he must get nearer and considers the simplest method is to encounter the individual assigned with locating him. Absorbing his reflections, Mu Wei determines that as long as it isn't a senior, he's assured he can overcome the assassin in the end. He understands it would be far preferable if the Zhang'an sect could manage this without needing his involvement. Without necessitating his involvement, that afternoon the followers of Zhang'an persist in their chase. One of them notices blade traces on the earth. One of them notices sword scratches on the ground. Their leader thinks that's evidence sufficient they're getting nearer to the assassin, and instructs them not to drop their vigilance. The group advances boldly, sprinting for the worst. Competing for the worst, the presence of the killer can be felt by the team leader. Someone observes them from the edge of a rooftop. It's Mu Wei who has executed his strategy. He can hardly believe there are merely 3 of them and one elderly man. From knowledge alone, he already realizes he's in difficulty. First-generation followers. Initial generation followers have precedence in the structure. Among them, only one is intended to become the chief of the group or faction as the central power of the establishment. As the central power of the organization, the young him and Zhou, referred to as the Holy Swordsman, is Mount Hua's faction's favorite. The Zhang'an sect is one of the most famous in Shaanxi, and certainly has its own preferred among the young apprentices. Among the youthful followers, but who is this remarkable disciple whose renown extends even though no one knows their identity? A young woman grins as she rejoices in discovering a martial artist. She presents herself as Il Mu of the Zhang'an sect. The others in the group also present themselves as Il Sun and Il Hun. As Il Sun and Il Hun formally and respectfully, Mu Wei presents a bow with modesty. He recognizes that it's a privilege to be in their company even though we occupy a lesser rank. Position. Kong is also present in the room and summons everyone to a meeting, clarifying that this meeting wasn't initially in his agenda. Il Mu clarifies that they were discussing the assassin, and that the leader believed it wise to wait for Mu Wei's arrival, as he wished to request some additional assistance. Without hesitation, Il Mu proceeds, clarifying that in reality there were 5 killers on the run, but 2 have been eliminated. But 2 have been slain. The leader speaks with worry, and stating they masked themselves and separated, making the pursuit increasingly challenging. The only thing that has assisted is his compound created by the sect leader, which enables the disciples to trace the assassin I dispatched. Even so, it doesn't resolve the issue, as they identified the scent of strawberry juice, but are unable to determine its precise origin. Kong appears astonished to discover that the clan was directed to that site. The disciple verifies that there is at least 1 killer. The follower verifies that there is at least 1 killer in the proximity of the Radiant Light sect premises. And although she cannot ascertain precisely who it is, she will require their assistance to attempt to discover. The leader provides his backing, and initially they must be capable of recognizing the fraud. Il Sun discloses that during their inquiries they observed that at each crime scene there are vacant bottles of liquor, leading them to assume that the murderer is a heavy imbiber. For the young apprentice of Mount Hoa, the reality that they don't concern themselves with leaving evidence demonstrates their hubris. So the strategy is to host a celebration with plenty of liquor. If the offender is that haughty, it's probable he'll respond to such incitement, and of course assembling numerous individuals in one location could act as lure. Il Mu retrieves something from within her attire. Clothing. It's a sleep gas capsule that will cause everyone to slumber immediately. Once they identify the assassin, they'll merely make everyone doze off to isolate and manage the target. Kong concurs with everything. Kong concurs with everything and states they should promptly start implementing the strategy. Carrying out the plan, deciding announces that you will host a grand celebration at night as darkness descends in Lucian and the full moon glows in the dim sky. And the complete moon glows in the dim sky. Jars of soju and makgeolli are placed on the tables. A massive roasted chicken adorns the dinner table. Kong initiates a toast in tribute to the disciples. Kong leads a toast in tribute to the followers of Mount Hoa and Jangon. Everyone lifts their glasses eagerly. Everyone lifts their glasses eagerly, consuming large swigs of the alcoholic beverage. Someone yells for another bottle. Someone calls for another bottle. Mu Wei gazes at the banquet spread out before him, filled with cuisine. Packed with cuisine, mouth watering with appetite, he determines that with a gathering like this no one would dare not attend. Then he regains composure, thinking it's best not to yield to his cravings, so they don't suspect he's the offender. But his companion is consuming like mad too. Unable to partake in the enjoyment. He observes with a touch of jealousy, noticing the other table where the youthful first-generation apprentices are assembled. Where the youthful initial generation followers are assembled, the fighter observes him. Observing subtly, she grins and warmly. Mu Wei doesn't reciprocate the sign, too absorbed with the notion that they must not suspect his team either. He also can't tolerate Juman's tendency of continually touching his nose. His side vision catches a motion from the chief. Abruptly rising from his chair. He then apologizes to the gathering, stating he requires to recuperate for practice. Preparation. No one appears to comprehend why he's departing, though Mu provides the indication for them to commence the hunt for the assassin. To commence the hunt for the murderer, someone fills a cup with makgeolli. 2 suspects are consuming heavily. A third also fills a cup with soju. A third also fills a glass with soju, downing it all in one swig without even pausing to inhale. The slumber gas is discharged by the followers and individuals start to fall down. Only the fighters stay conscious and vigilant, but no one rises. This indicates that either the assassin isn't present or he has discovered the scheme and is feigning slumber with the others. Mu Wei shares looks with Il-sun. And they arrive at an unforeseen conclusion. The assassin can solely be the chief of the Radiant Light sect. Of the Luminous Light faction, Mu indicates that she will watch over. Since they can't ascertain whether there's just one assassin on the site or additional ones, the hall descends into total quiet, and the 3 of them depart in pursuit of the leader, while Mu Hui requests Mu to look after his followers. Students, she stays seated watching. Someone opens a gap in the door of the sect leader's chamber. Of the faction leader's chamber, restless, the man strides back and forth and inquires if they've already identified who the interloper is. His demeanor and stare alter slightly. as he perceives something is amiss. After all, the young apprentices are merely standing there prepared to strike. Accusing him of being the murderer. The 3 insist that the chief disclose himself and yield. Kong persists in gazing at them earnestly. Mu Wei intimidates him and inquires if he still plans to refute it. If he still plans to reject it. Their son and Il-hun get ready to confront the leader. Suddenly a sword stabs through Il-hun's body. Suddenly a blade penetrates for Il-hun's body. His blood streams across the room, marking his friend's skin. The leader makes a quick motion and lunges toward the young Il-sun, kicking him out the window with a rapid strike. Mu Wei also delivers a strong kick to Il-hun's body. As the 2 observe them tumble into the ground beneath. The young disciple from Mount Hua already suspected they were the murderers, particularly after they asserted they could sense the demon. Even injured, they didn't perish. With crimson eyes, the 2 killers stand to their feet. Mu Hui and Kong hurry to the courtyard. Their son inquires if Il-hun is fine after that wound. Prompting the assassin attempts to heal, unaware that Mu Hui aims to evaluate his combat skills on him. Kong states the apprentice was correct, that they were truly the offenders, and there's still one additional, but the young man had arranged everything. And devised a snare for Il-mu with the others. She observes everyone drift off before striking and are yearning for corpses like a genuine demon. She stretches her talons toward Mu Hua, but she observes abrupt motion. Mu Hui rushes at her with his massive sword, hurling her away with the strength of the collision. Il-mu was propelled out the window in a jolt. Mu was hurled out the window in a jolt but lands on her feet astonished that she can't comprehend how they didn't doze off from the gas. He curses Mu, labeling her a coward for devising something so outrageous. Calling her a coward for devising something so outrageous, the assassin observes as they all extract claws from their noses. Swiftly she understands they were astute. Swiftly she understands they were smart and organized everything so effectively that she didn't even perceive. Still in the presence of her strength, Mu taunts the trio and inquires if they truly mean to battle her based on her evaluation. According to her evaluation, it will be simple and tedious to conquer them all, and so she presents a suggestion to the group. Though Mu proposes they abandon Manhwa to her. To her and flee far away, her crimson eyes blaze with a frightening radiance. Meanwhile in the courtyard, Kong rushes directly at Sun, intercepting one of his blows with his sole arm. The demon considers the action far too evident. The fiend discovers the maneuver far too evident, but Kong counters with a strong kick to the abdomen. The killer is enraged from the blow. The strike. The chief's blade cuts through the atmosphere toward the foe with rapid motions that unbalance Sun. With rapid motions that displace Sun off, the sect leader doesn't hesitate before severing the demon's right arm. Before severing the demon's right limb, as blood splatters everywhere, the assassin assaults Kong, fiercely clawing his face with his talons. Scraping his face with his talons, whom is in assault position, he hurls his claws at Manhwa, but the young man cuts them off. With a single swift sword strike. Weakened, the demon is then hit hard in the abdomen by the disciple. In the abdomen by the apprentice, the fiend stumbles backward, his eyes seethe with animosity as he glares at his adversary. Unfazed, the young apprentice doesn't halt and delivers another blow to the killer. The assassin. Hun is pushed back but recovers momentum and rushes toward Manhwa at high velocity. At rapid speed, but suddenly he loses power and drops to his knees, overwhelmed by an extremely intense agony. From within, the senior disciple watches the scenario and remarks the assassin is even feebler than he anticipated. Facial mimicry and bone contraction methods are what enable them to alter their appearance, and that only functions when they gaze directly into the victim's eyes. Manhwa concludes that they intersect with the disciples of Jinan and desires to know who is behind them. Acknowledging that the young man is accurate in his evaluation, the demon discloses that 2 of them were slain during the confrontation, but that they overcame the disciples. But Manhwa doesn't trust that account of the tale because the assassins possess no genuine skill and are no competition for the disciples. Whom merely labels him conceited. Whom merely refers to him as conceited, ultimately disclosing the blade in his ownership, leaving the young man astonished as he observes the armament, a representation of the faction crafted by skilled metalworkers. However, upon further examination, he understands it's a copy. It's a duplicate. Meanwhile, the demon clarifies that not just anyone is able to create a sword like that, and even reproducing one is a significant achievement. And even duplicating one is a significant achievement, verifying that this is indeed a blade from the Zoneman sect. Nonetheless, the senior disciple has uncertainties and wonders how they obtained such a weapon, and whether they truly eliminated the group's members. And whether they truly murdered the group's members. The assassin understands that Manhwa still doesn't trust their tale. Then he inquires slyly if the young man is on the same tier as his fellow disciples. At that moment, Manhwa is left astonished, and Elhan clarifies that even the demon assassins possess varying levels of skill. He mentions, for instance, their leader, who is exceptionally powerful even for the master who instructed them, finally disclosing that she eliminated all the disciples of the Zoneman sect in a surge of fury. Manhwa ultimately ends up harming himself severely. In a burst of fury, Manhwa ultimately wounds himself severely with a sword. Although Sun yells upon witnessing his companion perish, Kong doesn't comprehend why the youth hurried to eliminate the demon so hastily. So swiftly, the head tumbles across the courtyard like a soccer ball. The chief of the Radiant Light sect can hardly believe the method the young man just employed, but before he can utter anything, Manhwa dashes off in urgency. Desperation, sprinting against time as quickly as he can, remorseful for squandering so much time practicing his martial arts instead of assisting his team. He understands he must rush to avert the worst, as his disciples are in peril. Because his followers are in peril, the massive blade is marked crimson. Manhwa, Mu Chiyu and Jumin are almost deceased, and the killer is transporting their corpses. With the sinister stare. She claims that 2 of them may still depart alive. She states that 2 of them may still depart unscathed. The 3 of them gaze at the girl. Manhwa mentions she'll proceed first since the assassin appeared to favor her so greatly. Since the killer appeared to favor her so much, she readies for the assault and rushes directly at the young woman, but she is effortlessly able to protect herself with incredible strength. She hurls Manhwa back. Suddenly another team member approaches her. Dropping from above, he lands directly in front of her. He seizes his sword to strike, but as he assaults, the girl bends down and evades the hit. Now it's her moment to battle. Now it's her opportunity to battle. Using her blade, she succeeds in injuring the young man who was propelled backward. Abruptly someone shouts her name. She halts, attempting to comprehend where the sound is originating from. Where the sound is originating from, her eyes are crimson with rage. The individual who summoned her begins to fret, already brimming with remorse. Already filled with remorse, her opponent is craving for a genuine battle, but one who summoned her doesn't know how to proceed. Doesn't know what to do. Then we observe an ancient recollection. Something rests on the ground, being viciously assaulted by a masked individual. That outsider had no opportunity for survival. And the masked individual is pleased with what he's accomplished. Under a table, we observe a girl attempting not to make a noise. Her eyes are brimming with tears. Back in the current moment, a girl receives a blow to the face. A girl receives a blow to the face and is hurled far away, slamming hard into the ground. Into the earth. The demonic girl observes her, somewhat puzzled. The 2 share terrified looks. Manhwa chooses to go all in once more, rushing at her opponent. But her foe succeeds in seizing the sword and tries another blow. Hit. Manhwa doesn't know how to respond and ultimately gets hit in the abdomen. And concludes up getting hit in the abdomen. It pains her profoundly. Her opponent seizes her by the hair. Now another team member attempts to hit her, rushing at her with all his strength. The young man clutches his sword with resolve. Seizes his sword with resolve and aims it at the foe, but his opponent is even swifter, and her strike injures him severely. His associate is appalled by what she observes. She can't fathom this is truly occurring. Suddenly her younger self materializes beside her, imploring her not to take the chance. The little girl states nothing can conquer that beast. To her, the sole choice is to flee. Even if they attempt, they won't prevail in vanquishing her. She states that's the reason she's overlooked so many aspects in life. She never prepared sufficiently, only concentrated on endurance. Existence, and that identical thing occurred previously. She lacks that much bravery anymore. Now. Instead of battling, she'll have to make an alternative choice. But suddenly Mukiel shows up. Even hurt, he hasn't surrendered. He claims that individual is even more powerful than their senior apprentice. He instructs Muqian to depart and summon assistance, because he'll endure as long as he is able. Their adversary considers him obstinate for still attempting. The girl believes that fleeing might be the only rational option at that moment. And she desires to escape, but something feels off. She doesn't comprehend how everyone is still battling even after losing so much. Then she reverts to the cyclical thoughts from training. She doesn't believe she's adequate enough. Mukiel's suggestion made her feel comfort, not fury. She can't comprehend why she's still wavering. She recalls her instruction with a protagonist. According to him, Muqian has a propensity to undermine herself. He mentioned how she concealed her anxieties in the past and can't confront them today, and he urged her to recollect the first time she ever grasped a sword. So the young lady starts to attempt to remember it and goes back to her previous recollection. She's beneath the table once more, concealing herself, observing her relative being injured, while the beast wielding the axe grins with pleasure. She recalls feeling utterly isolated in that frightening location. There was nothing anyone could accomplish during the assault, except concealment. Opposition was entirely futile. The young girl witnessed as her family was shattered. The small girl observed as her family was shattered, and even so she was frightened and believed that was pitiful. To struggle with more bravery, she needed to master martial arts. She required to master martial arts, so she practiced, and as she did, 2 of her anxieties diminished. Now she had transformed into a new individual. She had genuinely conquered herself. She had genuinely surpassed herself, but she still wavers because she feels she hasn't prepared sufficiently. That's why Muqian lacks the bravery. She can't comprehend how everyone surrounding her continues battling that uncertainty. And she doesn't grasp why she experienced comfort at the opportunity to depart. She doesn't feel any distinct from when she was a kid. She doesn't sense any distinct change from when she was a kid. She feels as though she hasn't conquered anything. She senses like she hasn't conquered anything, and that she's still behaving like a coward. Evidently her training was for naught. She understands that all she ever did was attempt to flee her cowardice. To her, that sort of opposition is pitiful. To her, that sort of opposition is pitiful, and yet her squad continued battling against unfairness. Even hurt, they never surrendered, and that's why she endeavored to be like them. In the conflict she ascends with resolve. In the conflict she ascends with resolve. Now she determines she won't escape anymore. Her opponent observes her, astonished, and as she raises her gaze she notices the fighter rushing toward her with complete power. She finds it intriguing that she didn't retreat, but of course it's still annoying. Unfortunately, that creature manages to protect herself and hits the girl with full strength. She's left entirely bruised as she's tossed backward. She's remained entirely bruised as she's hurled backward. Later, that sinister woman is piling the squad's corpses until she perceives motion behind her. She pivots and observes the protagonist crouching beside one of the bodies. He's expressing regret for coming too late. He's expressing regret for getting there too late and pleads with them to wait just a bit longer. The young man aims to conclude this as swiftly as possible. The young man plans to conclude this as swiftly as possible. The woman gazes at him with interest. She considers him very entertaining. It's uncommon to see men as courageous as him. She states she doesn't typically favor men much, however, she doesn't object to confronting someone as daring and brave as he is. She's wishing you won't let her down. The fighter believes he must not undervalue her. He should just conclude her as swiftly as he can. He plans to concentrate entirely on his strikes. He aims to concentrate exclusively on his assaults, and the initial method he employs is the dream sword technique. The woman is propelled backward. She even sustains an injury from the impact. She becomes thrilled, recognizing that he's not only daring but also proficient. The warrior rushes at her with all his might, wielding his sword to hit her. Utilizing his blade to hit her, at that instant she understands she's utterly doomed. Abruptly, he employs the descending flower palm. Unexpectedly, he employs the descending flower palm and persists in assaulting her unceasingly. The woman clasps her hands together to utilize her power, and just as the young man is on the verge of hitting with his sword, she succeeds in halting him. Then she throws the fighter far away from there. He's astonished by the abrupt assault. The woman stands and observes him. Then she limps in his menacing posture. The young man continues gripping his sword with resolve. The youthful man continues gripping his sword with resolve. The creature is relishing the contest, but the youthful man solely desires to conclude it. Now the fight turns even more perilous and fierce. Now the conflict becomes even more perilous and fierce, both for giving everything they've got, but the swordsman continues to maintain his position. The fighter continues to maintain his position. He responds with resolve and keeps a vigilant watch on his opponent's actions. The one is shoved back forcefully but succeeds in deflecting a more powerful strike. Then she hits the protagonist. He falters backward, severely injured. He looks sideways at the woman. Assessing his next action with determination. He seizes his weapon and assaults her, and the blow is so powerful, and the assault is so fierce that the woman is hurled far back. The young man trails her, and the battle persists. The youthful man trails her, and the struggle persists from above. A fighter observes the spectacle develop. Now he perceives where Muji has been throughout all this duration. Time. He feels he shouldn't attempt to assist in his present condition. What he needs to do is try to aid the other disciples of Mount Hoa in the battle. The foe now employs a different method. That method transmits rays of light toward the protagonist. The main character. Both are immersed in the woods, battling with resolve. The swordsman persists in employing strong techniques, and with his blade he keeps hitting the woman. The ambience is charged with energy soaring everywhere. The fighter sprints directly toward his opponent. The lady is amazed by how effortlessly he obliterated her method. Unexpectedly, she grows fearful. The surroundings around them starts to change. And crimson smoke begins to ascend around her. It's a fresh power being released. The ambience starts to envelop the entire region. The environment starts to engulf the entire region, and the woman attempts to flee. Even though she's hurt, she believes the entire situation is truly awesome. And chooses to retaliate with her own method, which is rather strong. As a consequence, the young swordsman is pushed back. The young swordsman is propelled back with immense strength, but he utilizes that momentum to propel himself ahead, and then retaliates with his sword. The woman evades the strike with a grin. The lady evades the strike of grinning Mu Wei can't wait to complete this. That blow was sufficient to rip off one of her appendages. He kicks the wounded woman and she is thrown backward. And she is thrown backward there. She understands she has a significant issue and states she won't be able to enjoy it if he continues behaving that way. If he continues behaving that way, but of course the main character doesn't squander time. He rushes at her with all he's got and strikes once more. The woman rests on the ground. The swordsman observes her intently. The fighter observes her intently, but astonishingly she rises again. She glances over her shoulder, expecting the approaching blow, and utilizes her strength to strike him just the same. It almost cost him a limb. That frightened him a bit. He understands he must remain more vigilant to the woman. Her vitality is stronger than his, and that's what will cause her to succeed. And that's what will cause her to triumph. Pain might prevent him from doing much, and she finds that entertaining the protagonist. Understands he has to conclude this once, and for also he chooses to unleash his ultimate assault. The woman is astonished by what he just performed. The lady is astonished by what he just accomplished. His blade is thrust right through her form. His blade is stabbed right through her form. The sinister woman is hurled forcefully backward. Even so, she strives diligently to steady herself and not be tossed too far. And not be thrown too far. Harmed, she remains on the ground, attempting to comprehend what just occurred. By now, all her strawberry liquid is splattered across the floor. Is poured across the ground. On her knees, she recognizes the blade sealed her destiny. She inspects her injuries, finding it all odd and frightening. She can't comprehend how she arrived at this point. She can't comprehend how she found herself like this. She only desired to have enjoyment. The protagonist examines his arm to determine if he's hurt. The main character examines his arm to determine if he's hurt. Even now, the lady finds all of it somewhat entertaining. She begins to acknowledge that she lost the battle. The fighter inquires if there are additional creatures like her out there. The fighter inquires if there are additional creatures like her out there, but there aren't any remaining. They're all deceased. Apparently, they'll still encounter difficulties. Evidently, they'll still encounter difficulties from individuals like that. The woman remarks that the killers won't cease even if the followers of the hundred-faced beast were eradicated. The swordsman inquires if that man is truly deceased. The fighter inquires if that individual is truly deceased. What she understands that he never showed up in public again, so he has to be dead. So he must be deceased in reality. He's in seclusion, becoming as powerful as he can. The fighter seizes the blade lodged in the woman. The fighter seizes the blade lodged in the woman and turns it to inflict even more agony. The demon shrieks in anguish. The fiend shrieks in anguish, and the main character insists that she reveal all that she is aware of. In all that she understands, he desires to discover precisely who that hundred-faced beast is. The woman states there's nothing to express because her master is in a concealed place. She vows she's speaking the truth, but regardless, she has no motive to be truthful, wishing to conclude it swiftly. Desiring to conclude it swiftly, the young man employs the sword to wound her further. Since she delights in suffering, she even grins. And with that she's utterly vanquished. That could tumbles, and soon daybreak arrives. One of the followers starts to awaken. She stands alarmed. Her whole body hurts intensely from the battle next to her. The main character advises her to be cautious, not to injure herself more. She gazes at her elder attentively. She inquires what occurred to the attackers. She inquires what occurred with the assassins from the previous night. Their swordsman informs her not to fret. He's already handled them all. Everyone in the group is fine, and he advises the girl to consume something to recuperate. She sips it serenely. Then her superior expresses regret. He states he didn't anticipate their opponent to be that powerful. His associate might not have endured that. He didn't foresee everyone to give up themselves like that, and regards it unwise. But as their superior, it's his duty, and when he goes back to Mount Hoa, he will resign from his role. He has already notified everyone of his choice. Musil stated she was the only one who stood up against the killers. Since it's already late, he doesn't want to listen to all the specifics. In her recollections, we return to the moment where she rushed at her opponent. Lunged at her opponent, and her foe retaliated, hitting her fiercely. It pained her greatly. Her blade dropped to the earth. The entire time her companion had been observing. Abruptly, he stood up, astonishing the foe. The main character hears every detail. Mujin believes it all seems like a prank, but to the fighter none of it is significant anymore. Yet the young lady disagrees. Occasionally, the distinction between a minor act Occasionally, the distinction between a minor action and a genuine choice is what genuinely alters something to him. She's like this because she just battled someone exceptionally powerful, though sooner or later it might occur again. Though sooner or later it may occur again, what she needs to do is cease focusing so much on the past. Now the discussion has continued long enough. Now the dialogue has continued long enough. Her elder contacts her, and she inquires where they're heading. The warrior replies they're both going to practice, but she states she's still too injured to do that. But to Mu Hui, this is the ideal instance. Suddenly she discovers herself in a warm, comforting lake. Unexpectedly, she discovers herself in a cozy, comforting lake. Her friends are present too, discussing how pleasant it is to take that time for themselves. Mu Butte is also savoring the moment and unwinding. They are confident she's having a wonderful time, so the video concludes here. If you don't want to miss the upcoming part, if you don't wish to overlook the upcoming segment, enable the notification bell, and catch you next time on Tav's channel.